Chapter 559. Yang Chen did not tell any of the palace master or his master what he was going to do. Yang Chen did not want to let the Taishamen discover the clues and expose the clues because of their expectations or worries. The current Chunyang Palace was still unable to confront the Taishamen face to face. However, when Yang Chen left Chunyang Palace this time, he borrowed the array flag of the illusion array from Gong Sunling. After all, the welcoming array required a large open space. The violent spiritual fluctuations, if not concealed by the illusion array, would be discovered no matter where it was. Of course, the chosen location must be far enough from the Taishamen. Even if the Taishamen discovered the abnormality, the distance was too far, and it would be too late for them to stop it. Once the Taishamen's array had an accident, they could definitely find the location of the welcoming array arranged by Yang Chen through the same spiritual fluctuations of the two arrays. By the time they arrived, there wouldn't even be a strand of hair left. The open space was easy to find, and the spiritual power was supported by Yang Chen's top-grade spirit stone, so there was no problem in setting up the array. But before setting up the array, Yang Chen first used the illusion array to enclose a large open space, including the selected open space. From the outside, this place looked like a protruding cliff, and there was nothing there. In the illusion array, Yang Chen first arranged a spirit gathering array and a formation to isolate the spiritual fluctuations, so as not to arouse suspicion. Anyway, in the illusion array, Yang Chen was not afraid of being seen by others. Next, Yang Chen began to arrange the welcoming array. Yang Chen had studied this array in the Immortal world. For a period of time, the people of Xiantian sect even intended to sacrifice Yang Chen's cultivation to activate the array, so he also studied it very thoroughly, no less than those array masters. The formation was extremely complicated. Yang Chen had to measure, prepare the materials for the formation, weigh the materials accurately, refine the materials into the right shape, and arrange the formation in the right place. Even though Yang Chen was very familiar with the formation, it still took him a long time. The huge spirit array was taking shape bit by bit. The various runes made of various materials had been placed in appropriate positions, and the various key nodes had also been connected. In the end, all that was left was a slot to place the best quality spirit stone. As long as the best quality spirit stone was inserted and then activated, the spirit array could be smoothly activated. It took Yang Chen 3 years to complete all of this. When everything was ready, Yang Chen finally stopped. Now, Yang Chen did not dare to activate the formation, for fear that it would resonate with the Taishamen's formation and be discovered by the Taishamen. In the following period of time, Yang Chen would wander around to create his alibi. When leaving, Yang Chen covered the dome hall with the spirit array and placed it in the illusion array. In this way, even if someone found the illusion array and entered it, they would not be able to destroy the spirit array, unless they could break the sword array of the dome hall before Yang Chen arrived. Then Yang Chen's figure appeared in various places, and he appeared in many markets. Of course, when Yang Chen appeared in various markets and auctions, he only bought 2 things. One was the fire seed, and the other was the medicinal materials for alchemy, which made people more and more convinced that Yang Chen was an alchemist. Of course, Yang Chen left immediately after each purchase. Anyway, it was not a secret that Yang Chen now had a fast-flying magic weapon. Driving the shuttle, few people could stop him. In order to create some illusion for the Taishamen, Yang Chen even swaggered in the periphery of the Taishamen once. The time was 2 months before the activation of the spirit array in Yang Chen's memory. The Taishamen, just like in his previous life, began to release the news 3 months in advance that they would rebuild the mountain gate. The original mountain gate was not open to visitors. The guests who came to visit the Taishamen were changed to a guest house in another direction. The mountain gate had been in disrepair for a long time. It was normal to repair it every 100 years. Except for Yang Chen, no one felt anything wrong. Even some of the disciples of the Taishanmen were so naive that they did not know the deep meaning of the sect. After leaving the Taishanmen, Yang Chen quickly rushed to the side of the spirit array that he had arranged and waited quietly, waiting for the time when the spirit array would open. The place that Yang Chen chose was inaccessible, and there was almost no human habitation within hundreds of miles. On the day before the start, Yang Chen had prepared everything. Wan Qian's 5 female apprentices had also sat down in the corner of the formation, waiting for the formation to open, and Yang Chen began to pinch his fingers to calculate the arrival of the time. The time was already late at night, it was almost midnight. Yang Chen's right thumb came to the other fingers one by one and stopped on the index finger. It was at this time that Yang Chen's left hand had already taken the best quality spirit stone. The moment the time was up, Yang Chen put the best quality spirit stone on the groove, and then began to stimulate the spirit power. Boom! The entire spirit array was ignited in an instant. The dark earth suddenly seemed to be lit by a huge torch, illuminating the surrounding cliffs. A series of electric lights began to wander in the spirit array. In the midnight sky, it seemed that a black hole suddenly appeared. This black hole only appeared above the spirit array and hovered not far above the spirit array. If looked from a distance, it would be impossible to find the existence of this black hole. This was why the Taishanmen and other sects had made several consciousness clones to go to the lower realm without being seen through. The shape of the black hole was very strange, it looked like a semicircle. Above the spirit array, it began to slowly descend. From the corner of the semicircle, a black silk thread began to hang down and flew directly to the mouth of a woman in the spirit array. From the beginning of the black thread entering the woman's mouth, the semicircle in the sky began to slowly change shape, slowly becoming more and more circular, as if it was originally a complete circle, but half of it was missing, and now it was being replenished. And in the Taishanmen square thousands of miles away, there were a few sporadic figures standing. The spirit array here was also opened, and at the beginning it was the same scene. However, the moment the semicircle appeared, several high-level Taishanmen standing next to it all frowned. In the past, what appeared was a complete circle. How could it be a semicircle this time? No one knew what happened, and everyone looked at each other. When a black thread hung down from the semicircle and entered the carrier cultivator's mouth, the black thread seemed to be frightened and suddenly trembled. Then, the semicircle above the spirit array began to slowly disappear, and in a moment, it turned into a crescent moon. What's going on? The leader of the Taishanmen couldn't help but cry out. Chapter 560. Such a change was unprecedented. Even a fool would know that something must have gone wrong. However, no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't understand what was going on. Everyone watched this change, but there was nothing they could do. They didn't know how to reverse this situation. Suddenly, an elder of the Deshang stage raised his head and looked at the direction of the great array arranged by Yang Chen and suddenly said, "In that direction, there is a spiritual fluctuation almost exactly the same as the great array." Boom! Several high-level Taishanmen were almost detonated. How could this be? Someone has arranged the same array as the sect and is intercepting the clone of our sect. The elder of the Deshang stage shouted again, and the whole person turned into a sword light and flew wildly in the direction of Yang Chen. Stabilize the array. At the critical moment, the sect master shouted and several elders who were responsible for activating the array stabilized the array. However, the dangling black thread seemed to have encountered some kind of crazy resistance. It kept shaking and tangling, not stopping for even a moment. The black line kept drilling into the mouth of the first disciple of Wan Qian. Yang Chen's heart suddenly moved, and the other 4 female disciples flew to the side of the first female disciple and stood quietly. Yang Chen slowly watched the black hole become more and more round, and the hanging black silk line became thicker and thicker. When he felt that the first female disciple had absorbed 1/5 of it, he suddenly controlled the female disciple to fly directly out of the great array. The black line was interrupted by interference, and then began to look for the next suitable target. The second female disciple immediately took over the position of the first female disciple. The black line quickly found the small cherry mouth of the second female disciple and quickly drilled into it. Seeing that it was almost there, Yang Chun controlled the third female disciple to take over the second, then the fourth, and then the fifth. After all the black lines had drilled into the mouth of the 5 female disciples, the black hole above the array on Yang Chen's side had become half a full moon. In contrast, the array on the side of the Taishaman had become a small crescent moon. If the two sides were combined, it would be a full circle. Refine. Yang Chun suddenly shouted, and the 5 female disciples uniformly sat down on the side, and began to practice. What they cultivated was a small spell in the 3 purities secret art that Yang Chun had taught them not long ago, refining spiritual awareness. The 5 women did not have active consciousness at all. In fact, it was Yang Chun who controlled their bodies and then cultivated the 3 purities secret art. Descending to the lower realm with his consciousness avatar was a huge loss. Even if it was the consciousness of the great principal golden immortal, after descending, there would only be the level of the early Deshang stage. Due to the sudden appearance of 2 receiving arrays and the appearance of a total of 6 host cultivators, the consciousness that should have entered one of the host cultivators was divided into 6 parts. Yang Chen's side monopolized 5 portions, while the Taishaman, who really needed it, only had 1 portion. And this was the only one that existed, and it was still abnormally unstable. Entering the consciousness of the 5 female disciples of Wan Qian, there was no active consciousness at all, so the consciousness of the lower realm quickly took the initiative. However, Yang Chen's refining move directly sent the consciousness of the avatar to hell. Under the effect of the powerful 3 purities secret art refining consciousness, the separated consciousness had almost no ability to resist, and was directly controlled by the 3 purities secret art. Then it was continuously broken and cut, and the only remaining consciousness disappeared in less than an hour. The news passed down from above. Yang Chun didn't need to know at all, and he didn't want to know. The only result he wanted was to destroy the lower realm of the Taishaman's consciousness avatar, and then teach the Taishaman a lesson. At this moment, the first goal has basically been achieved. The consciousness of the avatar in the lower realm has been refined by 5/6, and the remaining 1/6 has suffered heavy damage to the spiritual awareness, plus the instinctive counterattack of the host cultivator. Even possession has become an extravagant hope, not to mention the transmission of messages. Yang Chen's 5 female puppets, after refining the consciousness of the avatar, all of their bodies glowed, and the spiritual power of their whole body vibrated. At this moment, all of them were promoted by a small realm, from the middle Jedon stage to the late Jedon stage. Swallowing the consciousness avatar can actually improve its own level? The improvement of spiritual power was very obvious, and even the spiritual awareness had been greatly improved. However, at this moment, Yang Chun couldn't care too much, and quickly controlled the 5 puppets to return to the medicine garden. The shuttle was already ready. Yang Chun jumped directly on the shuttle, and then drove the shuttle to flee far away. The black hole above the welcoming array was still slowly rotating. After Yang Chun escaped a certain distance, he suddenly launched another array that had already been arranged next to it. The array formation at the side was purely a destruction array formation. However, the moment the array formation was activated, a huge spiritual energy attack struck the center of the receiving array formation. The entire welcoming array flashed with a dazzling light, and then the entire array shook wildly, and soon the shaking turned into trembling. A certain position on the array suddenly cracked. This small crack began to change like dominoes, and the entire welcoming array began to crack, and in a short time, it covered the entire array. As if echoing with the welcoming array arranged by Yang Chun, the welcoming array at the gate of Taishaman also began to crack in the same position, and then the crack became unstoppable. It shook violently, and then, with a boom, the entire receiving formation exploded. Fragments of the formation shot out in all directions. "Not good, Flash." Several high-level leaders of Taishaman saw this. A master of the Deshang stage shouted, and his figure flashed a few miles away almost instantly. Boom! Along with the shattering of the array, the black hole suspended above the array also began to explode wildly. The loud sound traveled hundreds of kilometers, and a dazzling fiery light shot into the sky. After illuminating the entire sky, the black hole suddenly expanded, and a huge shock wave carried with it a destructive power. With the spell formation as the center, it fiercely rushed out in all directions. The gate of Taishaman, the villa where the outer sect disciples were located, the inner sect, and all the buildings within the entire mountain gate, were directly turned into powder in the face of this huge force. The scope of the explosion directly covered a radius of thousands of miles, and all the houses, including the houses of the sect, including the mountain gate and the houses on the periphery, were directly turned into ruins. Countless disciples of Taishaman did not have time to escape, and in this crazy explosion, were turned into minced meat. Just one explosion, and the entire Taishaman fell into a huge disaster. Chapter 561. The scope of the explosion of the array was too large. Even if Yang Chen escaped in time, he was still swept by the aftermath of the explosion and the shuttle shook. The only fortunate thing was that although the shuttle was not a pure protective magic weapon, it still had a certain degree of protection. After being swept by the aftermath of the explosion, it was not damaged at all, only causing a shock. Yang Chen was in the shuttle, enduring the crazy shock. After a while, everything disappeared and calmed down. This level of explosion and spiritual power riot, how could it not attract people's attention? However, when Yang Chen chose the location, it was in a place where there were few people. For a while, he was not afraid that someone could come over. As for the Taishaman, this place was tens of thousands of miles away from Taishaman. Even the strongest masters of Taishaman would take at least a month to come over. Driving the shuttle, Yang Chen returned to the place where the array was arranged. Then, he quickly summoned the 5 women and carefully picked up the formation materials that were scattered on the ground. These were some rare materials. Even if they had been damaged once, the materials themselves would not change. Moreover, these things left in place would also give people a lot of clues. Yang Chen would not be so careless. The materials that flew far away from the explosion had been bound in a small circle by a larger array. The spiritual power riot was so fierce that it was easy to find. At the moment when the two sides exploded at the same time, no one noticed that the carrier cultivator of the Taishaman suddenly trembled. Then, a black gas sprang out of the carrier cultivator and instantly returned to the black hole above the array. On the side of Yang Chen's array, the black hole suddenly became a complete circle at the moment of the explosion. A wisp of black gas, so fine that it was almost undetectable, burrowed into a corner of the formation at the moment of the explosion. Following the explosion, the fragments of the black gas were thrown high up into the air and fell into a certain area. Soon, the 5 women collected all the materials scattered around them. However, when she picked up the fragment that was hiding the black gas directly emerged from the fragment and quickly entered the 7 orifices of the female disciple, disappearing without a trace. The eyes of the female disciple suddenly shot a burst of light that was different from the previous kind of stupidity, flashed away, and immediately restored that kind of stupidity. According to Yang Chen's orders, the fragments of the formation in her field of vision were packed up and naturally returned to Yang Chen's side. Yang Chen waved his hand, and the 5 women went directly to the dome. Yang Chen looked around. Except for the mess, there were no clues that could be found. He smiled with satisfaction, summoned the shuttle, and flew quickly in the direction of Chunyang Palace. After flying continuously for 2 days, Yang Chen put away the shuttle, then found a secret place, arranged the illusion array, His body flashed and entered the illusion array. The dome hall quickly appeared, and Yang Chen walked in without thinking. In the hall, the 5 women were each occupying a corner, sitting on the ground, silently practicing. This was their normal state. As long as there were no other instructions from Yang Chen, they would practice here and increase their cultivation base. Under this kind of undistracted state, the growth rate of their cultivation base was comparable to that of those genius disciples. Don't pretend. Yang Chen looked at the female disciple who was attacked by the black gas and suddenly said, "They are all my puppets controlled by me. Do you think you can hide these things from me?" The strength of the 3 purities' secret art was something that this guy, who was originally a great principal golden immortal, could not guess. Naturally, he did not know that his every move had already been seen clearly by Yang Chen. Brush, the female disciple's reaction was not slow at all. She jumped up directly. However, she seemed to be very clear about the power of the 49 flying swords flying above the dome hall. She just stood there and did not move. If the physical body was finished, there would be no other possibility for his consciousness except death. Who dares to touch my avatar? She didn't know if it was because she was still not familiar with this body, or because the consciousness avatar was too seriously damaged when it came. The female disciple spoke intermittently, one word at a time, very awkward. "It's not good to enjoy a good life in your immortal world. Do you have to suffer this?" Yang Chen snorted coldly. "You are loyal to your sect. Unfortunately, you met me." The other party also seemed to realize that it was not good. She didn't know what method she used. The 2 female disciples on both sides of her also stood up and faced her. Their spiritual awareness suddenly released, as if they were transferring power to this female disciple. These 2 days were enough for the consciousness avatar to gather the consciousness that had been refined from the bodies of the 2 female disciples back into her current body. Even though her consciousness had been refined, the remaining instincts could still greatly increase her power. It was a pity that it was originally a consciousness avatar of a great principal golden immortal that had been weakened by 10,000 times. Even so, it still had the strength of the great ascension stage. It was just that, after being tossed around by Yang Chen's formation, the consciousness was actually divided into 6 parts. The other 5 parts had been refined, leaving only 1/6, but it no longer had the realm of the great ascension stage. It directly fell to the level of the late Yuanying stage. Originally, if she was allowed to quietly absorb the consciousness that had been refined and only left with instincts, there was still hope to rush back to the great ascension stage. At that time, controlling these 5 bodies of the middle Jedon stage, she still had the power to fight. However, she only absorbed 2 bodies and was discovered by Yang Chen. She had lost a lot of memory, most of the remaining instincts, and this consciousness avatar didn't even remember who she was. Now she was only instinctively aware that the sword formation above her head was dangerous. Instinctively, she knew that Yang Chen was an enemy and must be eliminated. She didn't know anything else at all. According to the usual practice, the consciousness avatar entered the body of the consciousness carrier cultivator. Because of the resistance of the original active consciousness of the carrier cultivator, the power of the consciousness avatar would be rapidly weakened. So usually, this kind of consciousness avatar would only last for a few days at most before the consciousness dissipated. However, the bodies of the 5 women without active consciousness were much more suitable than the consciousness carriers that any Taishaman were looking for. There was no active consciousness resistance at all. It was simply specially prepared for the consciousness avatar to descend to the lower realm. In this way, his consciousness avatar could be easily controlled in this body. In this case, it was not a question of how long it could survive, but with this body, the consciousness avatar was completely possible to cultivate again. When the realm was promoted and the memory was restored one by one, it might be a great master of ascension in the future. Chapter 562. It's not that Taishamen don't want to find a consciousness carrier with no active consciousness at all, it's really too difficult. The carrier cultivator must have a cultivation base in the Jedon stage, and the masters who reach this realm are almost all people with strong consciousness. It's easier said than done to make them an idiot. Cultivate from an early age? How can an idiot cultivate to the Jedon stage? Even if a lot of spiritual power is poured into the body every day, it's not possible. It's impossible not to improve the state of mind. As a last resort, Taishamen can only use other methods, such as trying to hypnotize the carrier cultivator and destroy his own consciousness with a powerful spiritual awareness. But in any case, it's still a little short, and it can't be completely without any active consciousness. As long as there is a little active consciousness of the main body, it will be a disaster for the descent of the consciousness clone. Even if it won't rebound for the time being, it will completely suppress the consciousness clone within a few days. After all, it's the original body and it has a natural advantage. Although he can't remember many things, the consciousness clone still instinctively realized that the bodies on Yang Chen's side were more suitable for his consciousness clone to descend. Unfortunately, before he could fully recover, he had to face the suppression of Yang Chen. Big, bold. Even if he didn't remember who he was, the consciousness clone still understood that his identity was noble and not an ant-like guy could offend him, and he shouted loudly. The female disciple shouted, but her body did not dare to move, for fear that the sword array above her head would destroy the most suitable body. Yang Chen certainly knew what she was worried about. In the same way, Yang Chen also cherished these 5 female Jedon stage cultivators and did not want to destroy them easily. After all, whether it was the 5 directions mysterious fairy formation or the blissful fairy formation formed by the 5 women, it could easily control a Yuanying stage master. It was a pity that it was destroyed like this. However, in the face of a consciousness that was only in the Deshang stage at most, and has not yet fully recovered 1/6 of his consciousness, how could Yang Chen be afraid? He smiled coldly and said to the other party, "Do you want to gather all the consciousness clone? Let me help you." The 2 female disciples behind him suddenly flew behind Yang Chen. Their bodies strangely flew up, one on each side. Their foreheads touched the back of Yang Chen's head as they hung in the air. "Come on. Along with my consciousness, if you have the ability, then come and collect them together." Yang Chen provoked the other party. He spread his arms wide, as if he was opening the door wide. If there were outsiders, they would definitely think that Yang Chen was a hooligan. With 2 seductive beauties hanging behind him and 3 more in front of him, Yang Chen's arms were wide open, just like a pervert. When the female disciple on the other side saw Yang Chen's posture, her eyes suddenly lit up. With a thought, the 2 female disciples on her left and right also flew behind her like the female disciple behind Yang Chen and touched her forehead to the back of her head. This posture was the easiest to transmit spiritual awareness. Generally speaking, there were only a few postures for spiritual awareness double cultivation. Either the forehead was facing each other, the back of the head was facing each other, the forehead was facing each other, or the head was facing each other. As soon as the 2 women took this posture, the consciousness clone noticed that the speed of her absorption of the original consciousness was greatly accelerated. In a short period of time, it had recovered half of the original consciousness. Although the active consciousness was only 1/6 of the original, the instinctive consciousness was still there, and she plus the 2 female disciples had absorbed 4 of the 6, accounting for more than 2/3. The opposite Yang Chen only accounted for 1/3. Even if Yang Chen himself was added, what could be changed? It seemed that she was hopeful to recover. Brush, the figure of the female disciple, with the 2 female disciples behind her, stood directly opposite Yang Chen. She also knew that if Yang Chen wanted to control the sword formation above her head to kill herself, it was only a matter of time, so she did not intend to fight with Yang Chen physically. As long as the consciousness battle prevailed, Why would she be afraid that these things of Yang Chen would not become her own? The foreheads of the two people touched together in an instant, and the consciousness clone's original great principle golden immortal instinctive consciousness attacked directly without thinking about it. The guys who could ascend, which one of them did not come out of the mountains of corpses and seas of blood, how could they not understand the benefits of taking the initiative to attack? The spiritual awareness that had already absorbed 2/3 of the power and was infinitely close to the Deshang stage rushed directly into the sea of consciousness of Yang Chen and soon found that in the sea of consciousness of Yang Chen, the other 1/3 of the instinctive consciousness already existed. Without thinking about it, he directly grabbed it and integrated it into his own body. The fusion of the spiritual awareness was very fast and completed in a flash. Immediately, the consciousness clone began to crazily attack the sea of consciousness of Yang Chen. As long as Yang Chen's sea of consciousness was destroyed, he could control everything of Yang Chen. With her great principle golden immortal vision, even if she had forgotten a lot of things, she could still distinguish between good and bad things. Even if the consciousness clone was only left with 1/6 of the active consciousness, as long as the active consciousness was not destroyed, with the improvement of the cultivation base in the future, it would recover a little bit. With these 5 most suitable avatars for his own possession, maybe he could also achieve the magical power of 5 external incarnations. The consciousness clone, which had fully recovered, did not encounter any resistance in Yang Chen's sea of consciousness, as if there was nothing in Yang Chen's sea of consciousness. Even the consciousness clone was amazed that Yang Chen's sea of consciousness was so big. With his current Deshang stage cultivation base, it was impossible to have such a huge sea of consciousness. This guy was not a simple guy. Suddenly there was a red color in front and the consciousness clone rushed over without thinking about it. However, this was the sea of consciousness of Yang Chen. No matter what, it would be limited by Yang Chen. Although the consciousness clone felt that it was fast, it was as slow as an old cow crawling. It took a while to rush to the front. The red color was a long river of blood. Strictly speaking, it should be on the top of the consciousness clone. However, in the consciousness there was no distinction between up and down, but it felt very difficult to get close to this long river of blood. Since it was so difficult to walk over, Yang Chen must cherish this long river of blood very much, and Yang Chen's sea of consciousness was so huge, it must have a certain relationship with the long river of blood. Although it was impossible to judge what was wrong with it, the consciousness clone instinctively knew that if he wanted to kill Yang Chen's consciousness, this long river of blood was the key. As long as it was broken, everything would not be a problem. Almost without thinking, the doppelganger's consciousness used its greatest speed, directly ignoring all kinds of obstructing forces, whipped the horse, like a victorious general about to directly attack the enemy's nest, and rushed into the long river of blood with a bang. Chapter 563. As soon as he entered the bloody river, the endless killing intent was like a substance, invading the consciousness of the avatar. Even if the consciousness avatar was already a great principle golden immortal, it was still not enough in the face of the bloody river that was integrated with the killing intent of the immortal beheading stage. Boom! The avatar consciousness was shocked by this killing intent. For a while, he stood in place and could no longer make any reaction. The immortal beheading stage was originally used to kill immortals. Even if it was a great principle golden immortal, there was a natural fear in the face of the immortal beheading stage. Even if it was not directly frightened into an idiot like Wan Qian and her disciple, they were also shocked to the point that they could no longer move. When the avatar consciousness was infected in the bloody river and suddenly saw an immortal beheading blade exuding boundless killing intent, the deterrent effect reached its peak. It was just a small avatar consciousness. How could it be as strong as the main body? When the immortal beheading saber directly slashed at the avatar consciousness, the mass of consciousness still did not have any reaction. all of its active consciousness was directly slashed by the saber, leaving no trace of consciousness. The moment the avatar consciousness dissipated in Yang Chen's mind, he suddenly received two very clear messages. The first one, of course, was the rebellion of the heavenly court that Yang Chen had long known. The mysterious heaven sect had entered the heavenly court, and even the sect master had served as the Jade Emperor. The second news surprised Yang Chen a little. It turned out to be the way to open a secret plane. This secret plane was not the secret plane after it was destroyed, nor was it arranged by the predecessors of the Taishanmen. It was left by an ascended rogue cultivator. The mysterious heaven sect got the news in the immortal world and specially passed it down. However, this secret plane was a bit special. Although the owner of the secret plane had probably warned it in detail about the dangers of the secret plane, this consciousness avatar had forgotten most of the content. It only remembered that it was very dangerous, and remembered the location and the way to open the secret plane, but it did not know the specific dangers. After the Taishanmen consciousness avatar descended to the lower realm in the immortal world, it seemed that they had suffered a very painful casualty. It was estimated that they died in this secret plane. Although it was very dangerous, Yang Chen did not feel that it was not worth it to get this secret plane. How bad could the news that the profound heaven sect had sent down their consciousness avatars to the lower realm be? Moreover, although the Taishanmen suffered many casualties back then, the subsequent development was even more rapid, which already explained a lot. While Yang Chen was still hesitating about how to deal with the secret plane, the Taishanmen were already in an uproar. The receiving formation's explosion wasn't that intense. What was intense was the passage above the formation. Firstly, Yang Chen had chosen a valley surrounded by mountains. Secondly, Yang Chen had set up several protection arrays on the surrounding mountains. Therefore, even if there was an explosion, Yang Chen could still collect all the materials in a small area. The aftermath of the explosion even covered an area of over 1,000 miles. On Taishanmen's side, the tunnel above the connecting formation exploded. Although it wasn't as intense as the one on Yang Chen's side, it still covered a radius of hundreds of miles in Taishanmen. The receiving formation was originally inside the mountain guarding formation. For Taishanmen, it could almost be said to be undefended. This explosion was at least 10 times stronger than the dozens of 10th water Yin thunder detonated by Liang Xiaoming that year. Tragically, there was an avatar of the old tree demon in Chunyang Palace that swallowed all the 10th water Yin thunder in one gulp and used his strong body to block most of the power of the 10th water Yin thunder. On the Taishanmen's side, they were not so lucky. Not to mention that there were no masters of the Deshang stage who were willing to sacrifice their lives to help the sect. Even if there were, they couldn't cover such a powerful and large-scale explosion. The crazy explosion directly destroyed hundreds of miles to the ground. In a place close to the center of the receiving formation, except for a few high-level people on the edge of the formation, who were protected by 3 masters of the Deshang stage, there was no one left alive around. The 3 magic weapons of the 3 masters of the Deshang stage were directly destroyed, and the magic weapons of several other high-level people were also damaged to varying degrees. Even in places farther away, all the houses were destroyed. Within 300 miles, the disciples below the Jedon stage, and within 500 miles, the disciples below the middle foundation stage, all died. The mountain guarding formation was directly destroyed from the inside, and before it was rearranged, it could no longer be activated. The entire Taishanmen was now under no protection. Several high-level Taishanmen under the protection of 3 masters of the Deshang stage, plus the power of their own protective magic weapons, did not suffer any damage. However, the 3 masters who were protecting them on the outside all had varying degrees of injuries. In a short time, they could hardly fight with others. Looking at the hellish scenery inside the sect, several high-level people, including the sect master, simply wanted to cry but had no tears. Who would have thought that the receiving formation, which had been going on for thousands of years, would have a problem. Thinking of the master of the Deshang stage, who had rushed out to find the same spiritual fluctuations as the receiving formation, several high-level people were not fools. As long as the elder could find evidence that someone was also arranging the receiving formation, then all this was a conspiracy against the Taishanmen. No matter who the guy was, no matter how strong his backing was, the sect master and the elders had secretly vowed to absolutely let the guy who conspired against the Taishanmen pay a heavy price. But at the moment, everyone's energy should be focused on cleaning up the mess quickly. Moreover, the destruction of the mountain gate always needed an explanation to the outside world. Whether it was true or false, it was always necessary. Such a big thing could not be concealed. Chunyang Palace directly pushed the boat with the current and framed the Shirwan Mountains last time. Anyway, there were indeed people in the Shirwan Mountains who appeared in the Chunyang Palace. Although it was only to fight against Yang Chen, it also gave Chunyang Palace an excellent excuse to make a move. Others were not clear, but the high-level people of the Taishanmen were clear that Chunyang Palace had long wanted to make a move on the Shirwan Mountains. But at the moment it seemed that there was no opponent with enough weight for the Taishanmen to rely on and pull everyone's hatred to the other side. If the Taishanmen admitted that they were interfered with when they guided the immortal world's consciousness clone to the lower realm, they could not afford to lose this face. For a while, in order to explain this to the outside world, several high-level people were also racking their brains. However, this explanation to the outside world was secondary. The important thing was that this time, not only was the sect destroyed, but the disciples in the sect suffered heavy casualties. More disciples were still injured and buried. If they were not rescued in time, the loss of the sect might be greater. Chapter 564. Within 100 miles from here, there was no need to carry out any treatment. Except for a few big shots, there was no living thing. 100 miles away, those surviving Jedon stage disciples had begun to be treated, and farther away, there were also people who had begun to help spontaneously. As soon as the big shots appeared, everyone's panicked mood suddenly calmed down. There were a few big shots in charge, and a few Deshang stage elders who almost never appeared also appeared, which made the Taishanmen quickly calm down. No matter how big the storm was, as long as these few ancestors were fine, the Taishanmen would be safe and sound. The Taishanmen had a big business, and because the scope of the explosion affected outside the mountain gate, after all, the explosion occurred in the original mountain gate reception area, it radiated hundreds of miles, and even the market outside the mountain gate was directly destroyed. At least thousands of innocent rogue cultivators and disciples of other sects in the market were also affected. For the Taishanmen, this explosion was simply a major terrorist attack. When the few big shots calmed down the fear of the disciples in the sect and began to arrange for their own rescue, it was already a day later. After that, the counting of the number of people saved lasted for a whole month. The results of the counting statistics made several high-level members of the Greatest Heaven sect directly vomit blood. Because the explosion occurred in the sect's reception area, and this place was where the original mountain gate was located. Not far from the mountain gate was the residence of the Taishanmen's quasi-outer mountain gate disciples and outer mountain gate disciples. Going further, it was the residence of the inner mountain gate disciples. Within 500 miles of the explosion, the disciples and servants below the foundation stage were all killed, and no one was left to breathe. This number alone had already reached tens of thousands. Although the number was large, all of them were below the foundation stage, and it did not seem to have much impact on the strength of the Taishanmen. However, this meant that the reserve forces of the Taishanmen were all destroyed in this explosion. The Taishanmen, who were at the height of their power, lost tens of thousands of disciples with cultivation aptitude overnight. For at least the next 100 years, the Taishanmen would be short of successors. In addition to the disciples below the foundation stage, there were also a lot of casualties among the disciples in the foundation stage. After counting, the casualties among the disciples in the foundation stage alone reached more than 2,000. Although this number was not a large number for a big sect like the Taishamen, it was close to a quarter of all the disciples in the foundation stage of the Chunyang Palace and the Chunyang Palace. If it was the Chunyang Palace, this loss would definitely be devastating. Strictly speaking, the strength of the Taishamen was not based on the disciples in the foundation stage, but the masters above the Jedan stage. If it was on a normal day, within 100 miles of the mountain gate, except for a master in the Deshang stage, other masters would not come here. The problem was that in order to ensure that the welcoming array would not be affected by someone accidentally breaking in, several big shots went out together this time. They also sent 4 Yuanying stage ancestors with 20 Jedan stage masters to be on guard in several directions around the array. Even if it was a Yuanying stage ancestor, under the protection of several masters of the Deshang stage, it was impossible to resist the power of the explosion at such a close distance. At the time of the explosion, the 4 Yuanying stage ancestors and 80 Jedan stage masters were directly turned into flying ash in the explosion. Taking the Chunyang Palace as an example, the 4 Yuanying stage ancestors were already half of the Yuanying stage ancestors in the Chunyang Palace. 80 Jedan stage masters were at least 1/5 of the number. This time, half of the strength of the Chunyang Palace was gone. Even if it was placed in the Taishamen, it was a loss that they were distressed to the extreme. How could the Yuanying stage ancestors be so easy to cultivate? They lost 4 at once, and this was not counting the 80 Jedan stage masters. Those who could be entrusted with important tasks on this occasion, which one of them was not a core disciple that was absolutely trusted by the sect. All of a sudden, they all collapse. This was only the loss of personnel. Those houses that were destroyed were no less than 100,000, and even the foundation of the mountain protection array was destroyed by more than half. If the loss of these properties could be completely ignored by the Taishamen, then the loss of some ancient books made the Taishamen extremely distressed. The jade slips used by the prospective outer sect disciples and the outer sect disciples to lay the foundation, which recorded the basic knowledge of cultivation methods, alchemy, refining and other miscellaneous, had been destroyed with the explosion because they were the closest. Even the scriptures pavilion of the inner sect disciples in the explosion range was destroyed by the explosion, and all the jade slips were destroyed. Although only some low-level cultivation methods and various basic knowledge were destroyed, those masters could still rely on memory to write it out again. However, not everyone had the abnormal memory of Yang Chen, and could also restore some of the cultivation experience or miscellaneous ancient books that had been referred to in the past. And some of the cultivation methods were obviously not cultivated by anyone, which meant that they were lost. Only this one item, the information of the basic cultivation methods of the Taishamen, was reduced by half. This was what the disciples of the Taishamen had worked hard to collect from all over the world in various ways, and it was destroyed. More than half of the basic inheritance was directly lost. Even if the Taishamen started to recruit the outer sect disciples again, because of the loss of disciples and ancient books, they had to take some from the undamaged slaves to recultivate. They couldn't let the inner sect disciples in the foundation establishment stage take charge of the prospective outer sect disciples, could they? Not to mention the inheritance, the new outer sect disciples would even face the embarrassment of having to do some chores by themselves, because there were not enough slaves to help them. However, even if all these were solved, the Taishamen had to face another problem. Because of this explosion, almost all the outer sect disciples were killed. Would anyone still dare to join the Taishamen, a sect that could not even protect its own outer sect disciples? Although the strength of the Taishamen was still the best among the first-class sections, these losses did not take into account another item, which was the reputation of the Taishamen. When the mountain gate of the Chunyang Palace was destroyed, they almost immediately uprooted the Shirwan Mountains with a thunderous method. Not only did their reputation not decline, but it became even more prosperous. Now, what means would the Taishamen use to restore their lost reputation? Such a huge loss, even as strong as the Taishamen, would definitely be hurt. During the statistical process of this period of time, facing the loss reports that accumulated day by day, several high-level people could only use one word to describe their feelings, wanting to cry but having no tears. And while the high-level people of the Taishamen were collectively anxious and hated the guy who destroyed the consciousness clone in the lower world, the news that the Taishamen sect was destroyed by the crazy explosion had spread throughout the world of cultivation. Chapter 565. Although the active consciousness of the avatar consciousness was killed, the remaining avatar consciousnesses did not dissipate, and there was still an instinctive consciousness. However, this has no threat to Yang Chen at all. In Yang Chen's sea of consciousness, such a powerful Deshang stage consciousness was simply an excellent tonic. Remote control of the 5 female puppets refining 1/6 of their active consciousness could directly improve the 5 women by a realm, not to mention that Yang Chen personally refined the remaining 1/6 of the active consciousness in his mind plus all the instinctive consciousness. The spiritual awareness was like being poured with growth hormones, growing wildly. This kind of benefits that came to the door, he didn't want it. Yang Chen has now reached the Jedon realm, and for a long time, he did not have to worry about the splitting of his spiritual awareness. This avatar consciousness of the immortal world's great principle golden immortal was soon completely turned into nothingness under the powerful 3 purities secret art. Originally, Yang Chen's spiritual awareness was highly condensed, but the avatar consciousness of the great principle golden immortal was not given in vain. The peak Yuanying stage, the breakthrough, the early Deshang stage, until the peak of the early Deshang stage, the growth of the spiritual awareness stopped. The sea of consciousness shrank from 150 acres, expanded again, and returned to the size of 200 acres again. Whether it was the 5th earth layer, Penglai divine wood, or the Oxhead Bridge and the Inyang heaven burning fire dragon, they were all proportionally larger and more solid. The spiritual awareness of the Deshang stage made Yang Chen almost able to control all the magic weapons on his body, including the golden bell and the sea jasper in his body, plus the shuttle. This refining took Yang Chen a whole month. When he finished refining and drove the shuttle, he immediately found that the speed had increased by 50%. If the shuttle had this speed when Luo Yuan chased Yang Chen at that time, Yang Chen could stop and rest for 2 or 4 hours every day, waiting for Luo Yuan to catch up slowly, otherwise Luo Yuan would lose him. Leisurely rushing back to Chunyang Palace, the first thing Yang Chen did was to rush to the sect's warehouse. He first paid a visit to Elder Jingfeng, and then returned the materials that he had lent out before. Elder Jingfeng had never thought that Yang Chen would need to return what he had lent out. However, since Yang Chen insisted, Elder Jingfeng would not refuse. He still opened the door and let Yang Chen put away his things. Before Yang Chen came out of the warehouse, Elder Jingfeng entered the warehouse with a smile. After helping Yang Chen put away the things, he directly took Yang Chen to the main hall of Chunyang Palace. Ha 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 ha! Before he arrived, he heard the unscrupulous laughter of the head of the palace, as if something great had happened in the Chunyang Palace. Yang Chen certainly knew why the palace master laughed. After such a long time, no matter how hard the Taishamen tried to block the news, it should have reached them by now. However, he still calmly followed Elder Jingfeng into the main hall. In the main hall, it seemed that except for Wang Yong, who was in retreat, several elders were all present, and Gui Shanyu of the Hall of Eccentrics was also there, as if they were waiting for Yang Chen. Looking at this posture, Yang Chen naturally understood what it meant. The Taishamen also have this day. A few restrictions came out, and the first sentence of the palace master was a shout of joy, and then he laughed again. Yang Chen, you came back at the right time. With the restrictions, several elders spoke unscrupulously. Gao Shiyan was simply overjoyed and introduced to Yang Chen, Today I received the news that the Taishaman sect was attacked, and the outer sect disciples were all destroyed. Tens of thousands of disciples and servants were killed, including 4 Yuanying stage masters and 80 Jedon stage masters. Half of the sect was destroyed. It was very satisfying. Originally, this was a high-level meeting of the Chunyang Palace, but as long as Yang Chen was there, he would be pulled in. This was the acquiescence of several elders and the head of the palace. From now on, Yang Chen would be cultivated as an heir. So ruthless. Yang Chen knew that his detonation of the welcoming array would definitely cause a chain reaction on the side of the Taishaman, but he did not expect that there would be such a brilliant result, and he was overjoyed. The most basic purpose of Yang Chen, of course, was to destroy the descent of the Immortal World Consciousness clone and cut off the news channels of the Taishaman. The second was to give some damage to the Taishaman. Originally, he did not hold much expectation, but he got such a huge effect. How could it not make Yang Chen happy? The more you climb the mountain, the more you meet the tiger. Zhu Chentao also said with a happy smile, the Taishaman have been overbearing for so many years, but they still offended people who should not be offended. This time, the great hatred of the destruction of our sect, after all, someone still avenged us. The palace master and the elders were simply celebrating. This hidden in the dark was the same as the Dao sect, but always wanted to deal with the enemy of the Chunyang Palace. They were so happy that they suffered such misfortune. However, with their identity, they could not make such a performance publicly. They could only hide and be secretly happy. When they returned to the people, they still had to seriously support the Taishaman. Otherwise, it would be easy for the Taishaman to guess that they already knew the truth about Liang Xiaoming. Even now, the Chunyang Palace still did not have the capital to deal with the Taishaman. Some things still could not be put on the surface. This was the sorrow of the weak. When the strength was not enough, even in the face of the enemy, they could only endure. But in any case, it was certain that they were happy. The big shots and Yang Chen did not treat each other as outsiders. They directly let Yang Chen take out the Jade Dragon wine, and they drank and celebrated in the main hall of the Chunyang Palace. It was rare to encounter such a thing worth celebrating. Everyone even put down their usual high and mighty attitude, and they were presumptuous for a while. After enjoying the Jade Dragon wine, they were disbanded with admiration and went back. In the main hall, only the palace master and Yang Chen were left. Elder Jingfeng drank happily. When he was about to leave, he was pulled by Yang Chen. After a while, he found an excuse to return to the main hall. After a few more restrictions, the palace master even felt that it was not safe. He directly took the two to his own portable medicine garden. He asked in a deep voice, Yang Chen, what's the matter? Wan Qian was not known where the palace master was hiding. Anyway, he did not see her after coming in. Yang Chen and Jing Feng certainly would not be rude to open their spiritual awareness to explore in the territory of the palace master. After listening to the palace master's question, Yang Chen said, Palace master, Elder Jing, this disciple wants to ask the elder to hold an auction in the near future. After refining the materials that the disciple took out, I will sell them as soon as possible. Why is this? Elder Jing Feng was stunned. He had not figured out the problem and asked in amazement. Chapter 566. The palace master's eyes lit up. He seemed to think of something, but his mouth was very casual and said, Since you said so, then let's do it. Junior brother Jing, I'll trouble you to refine those materials, and send them out in batches as soon as possible. I'll do it right away. I'll do it. Elder Jing Feng got up and nodded directly, and started to act without saying anything. Chunyang Palace was now united, especially the top level. It was completely harmonious, and there was no phenomenon of fighting for power and profit. For people who cultivated, once they found out that they had the hope of achieving the Deshang stage or even ascending, who would care about the secular power? Everyone at the top of the sect now had the questioning inner heart pill. Everyone saw the pursuit. Even if they piled up the power of the sect, the elders felt that it was a waste of time and hindered their own cultivation. Who would take the initiative to do it? If it weren't for some things that depended on them to control the overall situation, maybe they would even want to resign as elders and concentrate on cultivation. Wait. Elder Jingfeng was about to leave, but the palace master suddenly stopped him. Elder Jingfeng hurriedly turned back and looked at the palace master, waiting for the instructions of the palace master. Don't let it out like this. The palace master hesitated for a moment and said again, let the Jedon stage disciples who are good at refining work hard, use these materials, and create a batch of flying sword embryos. After taking it back, let Gao Yu slightly change the appearance and distribute it to the disciples who have recently performed well. The record date of the refining is 20 years in advance. No matter who asks, just say that the sect's disciple Gao Yu has been in retreat for 30 years and refined this batch of flying sword. Although he didn't know what happened to Yang Chun here, Yang Chun was in a hurry to sell this batch of things. There must be a reason, for fear that others would find out about this batch of materials. The palace master also knew that Yang Chun took a batch of high-level materials, so he simply did not release any of them, to help his own sect's disciples, and even put the matter on Gao Yu. He believed that with the relationship between Yang Chun and Gao Yu would definitely recognize it. This batch of sword embryos made of high-level materials was also enough to become some disciple's life source flying sword. Of course, although the sword embryo was good, it still required everyone's own efforts. Normally, materials of this level would not be released so easily. Since there was a problem, they might as well help a group of loyal disciples. Moreover, it would be better to cover up the whereabouts of the materials. Even if someone investigated, they would not be able to find a trace. Elder Jingfeng looked at the palace lord, then looked at Yang Chun. A trace of doubt flashed across his face, his eyes fixed on Yang Chen's face, seemingly waiting for an answer. Facing Elder Jingfeng's gaze, Yang Chun fiercely nodded at him, as if admitting something. Joy immediately appeared on Elder Jingfeng's face. He laughed and then said loudly, I'll go and arrange it. This time, there's no need for anyone else to do it. We old fellows will do it ourselves. There won't be any mistakes. After sending out Elder Jingfeng, the head of the palace waved his hand, and a table and 2 chairs appeared in the medicine garden. Without waiting for Yang Chun to say anything, the head of the palace waved his hand and stopped him. Wait a minute, take out your jade dragon wine, drink it and talk. Wan Qian, who had been hidden somewhere by the palace mistress, suddenly appeared at the table, holding 2 plates of seemingly delicious fruits in her hands. It seemed that the taste of the palace master and Yang Chun was the same. They both liked to use the things produced in the medicine garden to accompany the wine. Under the well-behaved service of Wan Qian, the head of the palace and Yang Chun sat on one side. After drinking a cup, the head of the palace said, Say it. Yang Chun said what he had done. Of course, it was not detailed enough that he knew the time of the activation of the other party's welcoming array. He just said that he accidentally discovered the array at the gate of the Taishanmen. He found that in a miscellaneous book, there were 2 of the same kind of array, which could cause the same frequency oscillation. The spiritual power could not be controlled, and eventually led to an explosion. Hearing Yang Chun directly admit that he arranged another similar array, and then used the spiritual power oscillation to make the Taishanmen's array explode, which eventually caused huge losses and heavy casualties of the Taishanmen, the head of the palace was simply happy. He kept drinking the delicious jade dragon wine, and let go of his restraint. He was a different person from the usually dignified and steady head of the palace. It was Yang Chun who discovered the conspiracy of the Taishanmen. Now he had avenged the destruction of the sect's mountain gate. It was also Yang Chun, and he did it so beautifully. The head of the palace had long been so happy that he did not know how to describe it. He only knew that the sect accepting Yang Chun was definitely the best thing he had ever done in his life. The only pity was that the head of the palace could only share this happiness with Yang Chen, and could not even talk to other elders. Even if Elder Jingfeng had already vaguely guessed something, Yang Chen just nodded silently, but would never easily admit it. The matter was too important. It was not an exaggeration to describe it as a hole in the sky. Once it was caught by the Taishanmen, even if the strength of the Chunyang Palace had soared, they still could not escape the fate of being destroyed. Therefore, whether it was Yang Chen or the head of the palace, they were quite cautious. However, such a happy thing could only be kept in the stomach. Even the head of the palace could not help but feel a little aggrieved. But the joyful mood would never change because of this little regret. The head of the palace was simply satisfied with the successor he had chosen. Capable, not fighting for a moment, loyal to the sect, repeatedly making unexpected surprises. There had never been a disciple who made the head of the palace so satisfied. For Yang Chen, he was already satisfied and could not be more satisfied. Yang Chen accompanied the head of the palace to drink for almost a whole day. The head of the palace was happy. How could Yang Chen not be happy? This time, almost half of the inheritance of the Taishanmen was eliminated, so that the pace of the Taishanmen's expansion was slowed down for more than 100 years. All of this was a gift outside of his own main purpose. How could Yang Chen not be happy? Even if the Taishanmen were big, it was impossible to bear this kind of blow again and again, right? Yang Chen was now like the little ant who had dug 1,000 miles of embankment. He was hollowing out the Taishanmen little by little. He was one step closer to his revenge. He just didn't know if this time he had directly killed the enemy of his previous life, Yang Lan. In his subconscious, Yang Chen did not want this kind of thing to happen. His own life and death enemy, the guy who caused the misfortune of his and his master's previous life, if he died like this, it would definitely be too easy for him. Yang Chen still thought that one day, he would personally cut off his head. When he was tipsy, Yang Chen suddenly began to worry. How to get the benefits of the secret plane in his hands, and not expose himself, and not expose the pure Yang Palace. Chapter 567. The secret plane was very dangerous, there was no doubt about this. Even in his previous life, with the fierceness of the Taishanmen, they still lost a lot of manpower. If Chunyang Palace wanted to swallow this secret plane, I am afraid that it would never pay less than the price of the Taishanmen. Another point was that the intelligence of this secret plane was sent by the consciousness clone of the immortal world. Although this time the Taishanmen did not get any news, who could guarantee that the next time the consciousness clone came, the Taishanmen would not know? At that time, the sect or individual who swallowed the secret plane would definitely be the target of the crazy revenge of the Taishanmen. Speaking of it, this secret plane was really a bit of a hot potato. Compared with the rich resources inside, the safety of the sect and personal safety were more important. However, it was absolutely impossible for Yang Chen to give up the wealth of this secret plane to the Taishanmen. Since he couldn't take it himself, he couldn't let the Taishanmen get this benefit. As long as several big sects were involved, maybe Chunyang Palace could get a piece of the pie in the end. Explain it to the head of the palace? Yang Chen couldn't explain where he got the news, so it was better to do it secretly. After making up his mind, Yang Chen had no burden and enjoyed the Jade Dragon wine with the head of the palace. Today, the head of the palace was in a good mood. It may be the first indulgence after he was promoted to the Yuanying stage ancestor. He was drunk until he was unconscious, and even forgot to release Yang Chen from the medicine garden. Chunyang Palace was celebrating happily, but the Taishanmen had already ignited a raging anger. The elder of the Deshang stage, who rushed out to find the same spiritual power fluctuations as the welcoming array, had returned and brought back a piece of news that shocked the Taishanmen's high-level officials. The place where the formation was arranged had been found. In fact, with such a large range, it was impossible to cover it seamlessly, and it was inevitable to be discovered. However, he only found traces of an explosion. As for any other spiritual power or divine sense, not even a trace of smell was left. By the time he arrived, it had been raining heavily for several days due to the abnormal spiritual energy. Other than confirming that it was the site of the explosion, he couldn't find any other clues. For such a huge explosion to appear in an uninhabited area with a radius of several hundred kilometers, yet the center of the explosion was similar to that of the Great Guiding Formation, this already explained many problems. What made people's eyes almost pop out of their sockets was that there was not a single valuable thing left in such a large area that could be used to trace the opponent. Even the debris after the explosion was cleaned up. It was simply a joke to rely on this to trace. The only thing that could be confirmed was that someone had also set up the same receiving formation and detonated it, causing the Taishaman's consciousness avatar to fail on the verge of success in descending to the lower realm, causing a disaster. All the Taishaman's higher-ups were like bulls that had been provoked and had already turned red. They looked at everyone as if they were murderers. The lives of tens of thousands of disciples and servants, even if they had to burn their bones and scatter their ashes, they would not hesitate to catch the murderer. In fact, all the Taishaman's disciples above Jedon had been sent out and began to frantically search for any possible clues. The higher-ups had already issued the pattern and materials of the receiving formation. Any formation master and those who had come into contact with these materials would be the first suspects. The Taishaman's anger was the joy of many sections. Although with the status of the Taishaman in Taoism, even if they were happy, they were just like the higher-ups of the Chunyang Palace who secretly hid to drink and celebrate. However, happiness was happiness. Even during these days of cultivation, they felt that their state of mind was open and their cultivation was advancing day by day. As for some disciples of the Demon Gate and Demon Cultivators, they did not even hide their happiness. Everyone was originally in a life-and-death hostile position. Someone had helped them vent their anger, and they couldn't wait to celebrate crazily. The arrogance of the Taishaman over the years had indeed made many people dissatisfied. It was just that because of the strength of the Taishaman and some matters of face, no one showed their dissatisfaction. Even the attitudes of several other big sects were like this. It could be seen how unpopular the Taishaman had been in these years. The first suspects of the Taishaman were the several big sects that were almost as famous as them. Everyone was competing for the position of the leader of the Taoism, and sometimes there was constant discord in the open and in the dark. The incident of the 5 Elements sect in the barren sand valley was one of them. However, the Taishaman, whose strength had been greatly damaged, could not bear the consequences of becoming enemies with several big sects at the same time. Although they were suspicious, they did not dare to show it. The second suspects were some big sect of the Demon Gate and some extremely powerful Demon Cultivator Alliance. Only they were the enemies of the Taishaman for a long time. It was really normal for them to do such a thing. The third level was the alliance of some overseas individual cultivators. The Taoism, led by the Taishaman, ruled the most fertile area on this land. These individual cultivators could only be forced to go overseas to find a living space. Although there was sometimes no shortage of cultivation-blessed lands with abundant spiritual power overseas, they had to compete with some powerful guys. It would be a lie if they did not hate the Taishaman. They were eager to see something happen to the Taishaman. The last suspects were the other small sects in the Taoism. Among them, the Chunyang Palace was relatively more suspicious, because a few decades ago, the mountain gate of the Chunyang Palace had been destroyed once, but no one died. Who knew if the Chunyang Palace was venting their anger and revenge? However, the senior leaders of the Taishaman were still not sure about this. They were not sure if the Chunyang Palace had already known the truth. After all, for so many years, the Chunyang Palace had always claimed that it was the doing of the Shirwan Mountains, and they had directly destroyed the Shirwan Mountains. At the same time, their attitude toward the Taishaman had not changed from beginning to end, so the senior leaders of the Taishaman were not sure. As for the other small sects and the more numerous individual cultivators, they were the least suspected. Of course, this did not mean that they were not suspected. Almost everyone who had a little reputation for the research of formations was suspected. The people of the Taishanmen almost went crazy to investigate every cultivator, which also caused panic among the cultivators. Some people had just raised a little objection, thinking that this was a little too much. Less than a day after saying this, the people of the Taishanmen came to the door and cut off their heads. From then on, no one dared to say anything and let the Taishanmen do whatever they wanted. Of course, these were all individual cultivators. The Taishanmen did not dare to have such an attitude toward the real big sect. It happened to be a time of great changes. If they were jointly suppressed by the big sect, the famous Taishanmen would not be able to bear it. Chapter 568. The welcoming formation had always been the core secret of the sect. It could almost be said that except for the head of the sect and a few rare core elders, it was impossible to come into contact with it. On the side of the Taishanmen, someone had arranged an identical welcoming formation. Could it be that there was a problem with these core elders? The sect master was a smart person and did not have such doubts. Almost all of these elders were masters of the Deshang stage, and they lived in seclusion. They basically did not care about the affairs of the world. They only wanted to ascend. How could they do this kind of thing? However, everything was inexplicable. Why? Could it be that the other party was not a welcoming formation, but another kind of formation that could induce the explosion of the welcoming formation? Thinking of the inexplicable semicircular black hole above the welcoming formation at that time, everyone was puzzled. Everyone couldn't help but be confused. Even Yang Chen did not know what the effect of arranging two welcoming formations at the same time would be. He just tried it with a little hope and succeeded in one fell swoop. And the Taishanmen's knowledge of the formation was not necessarily half of Yang Chen's. How could they figure out such a core problem? But the doubts continued. The Taishanmen were like mad dogs, attacking everywhere. Their blood-red eyes stared at all the suspicious people. As long as there was a slight movement, they would definitely swarm up and put the opponent to death. The Taishanmen were really anxious. After such a long time, not to mention revenge, they couldn't even find the target. At that time, the Chunyang Palace was only on the day of the explosion, but they caught the people of the 100,000 mountains. Moreover, a month after everyone was still talking about it, they directly brought people to the 100,000 mountains. It must be known that even if they rushed from the Chunyang Palace to the 100,000 mountains, it would take almost a month on the road. To say that the Chunyang Palace was not prepared was nonsense. The Taishanmen knew that for the 100,000 mountains, the Chunyang Palace had prepared for at least several years. However, even the small Chunyang Palace could immediately find a target to vent their anger when they were bombed, and even took the huge benefits of the 100,000 mountains. For the Taishanmen, they didn't even know who their opponent was. How could they not be angry? More than a month passed, and there was no clue at all. On the contrary, many people had a different view of the Taishanmen again. It was just because of the special situation at this time, everyone dared not speak out in anger, but behind the scenes, who didn't applaud the bombing of the Greatest Heaven sect, and wished that the Greatest Heaven sect would be bombed a few more times. However, after all, the Taishanmen were still the Taishanmen. Soon, dozens of small sects united to denounce this destructive act against the Taishanmen. At the same time, these dozens of small sects collectively threw themselves into the arms of the Taishanmen and became a part of the Taishanmen. Not only these dozens of small sects, but even several rogue cultivator alliances also came over and directly joined the Taishanmen. Although the Taishanmen had suffered heavy casualties after the explosion, with the addition of so many new sects and forces, they also recovered part of their strength in just a few dozen days. Even if these joining forces were not as strong as the Taishanmen in the past, the addition of the reserve forces, especially the disciples and servants of the outer sects, eased the urgent needs of the Taishanmen. In a short period of time, they no longer had to worry about the lack of successors, and the dilemma that even if they recruited disciples, they could not train them. People with discerning eyes could almost immediately see that these dozens of small sects did not support the Taishamen because of this matter. It was clear that the Taishamen had long placed their pawns, and had been helping them do things that were inconvenient for the Taishamen to show up. Now that the Taishamen were in trouble, naturally, they returned immediately to strengthen their prestige. Such actions, although there were several big sects, none of them were as powerful as the Taishamen. Dozens of small sects, plus 2 small rogue cultivator alliances, each of which did not look very eye-catching, at most had a Yuanying stage ancestor, but the combined strength was surprising, even not worse than the Chunyang Palace. What made people most speechless was that this was still part of the strength of the Taishamen hidden in the dark. Who knew if the Taishamen had revealed all the strength they controlled? This action immediately caused many sects to be even more vigilant in their hearts. What were the Taishamen trying to do? They had secretly arranged so many pawns, many of which were even around several other big sects. Their intentions were almost obvious. Fortunately, there was this explosion. In order to stabilize the morale of the sect, the Taishamen exposed these hidden pawns. If it had continued like this, maybe these hidden pawns would be the culprits of the explosion of their own sect one day. Good explosion. For the arrangement of the Taishamen, countless people once again issued such a voice in their hearts, and began to intentionally or unintentionally set up a variety of mazes for the investigation of the Taishamen. Elder Jingfeng was more certain of everything when the Taishamen began to investigate certain materials. At the same time, he also urged several old fellows of the Yuanying stage to quickly work and refine those materials. With the help of the 8 newly joined Yuanying stage monsters in the Blue Vault Mountain Immortal's cave, several elders worked together, and this matter was handled quickly. In just 5 days, all the things were handed over to Gao Yu. Gao Yu has been consolidating her realm recently. The water attribute spirit power cultivation base is almost the same as the fire attribute spirit power, and Yang Chen also suggested to her when she came out of seclusion that she should cultivate both water and fire. As long as it is coordinated, these 2 opposite attributes can definitely bring unexpected disasters to the opponent. What is this? Seeing a lot of good sword embryos sent by Elder Jingfeng, Gao Yu couldn't help but ask in surprise. Let Yang Chen explain it to you. Elder Jingfeng put down the things, left a sentence, and did not stay much, and left directly. Yang Chen was here with Gao Yu. It was not easy to come back, of course. He had to accompany his master. It was not to have a spiritual awareness double cultivation with his master, but here with Gao Yu, Yang Chen could not think about anything, just enjoy the warm and tempting taste. Since Elder Jingfeng said so, Yang Chen certainly couldn't not explain at all. After thinking about it, Yang Chen decided to take out the words of the master of the palace and said it to Gao Yu. The Taishamen's great disaster was actually all because of Yang Chen? Gao Yu couldn't believe her ears. Once such a thing was leaked, not only for Yang Chen, but for the entire Chunyang Palace, it would be a disaster. What should we do with these sword embryos? After listening to Yang Chen's description, Gao Yu picked up a sword embryo without saying a word and asked. Since these things were hidden dangers, it was necessary to cover them up for Yang Chen even if they had to risk their lives. Chapter 569. Gao Yu was busy in an instant, and Yang Chen was idle once again. At this time, he finally began to think about the words of the master of the palace after he was drunk. Since you are already in the Jedon stage, consider accepting a few talented apprentices. This was the original words of the master of the palace at that time. According to the rules of Chunyang Palace, only those who reached the Jedon stage could accept apprentices. Of course, this referred to the disciples of the inner sect. In fact, most of the sects had such rules, otherwise they would not turn the Jedon stage into a master. The words of the master of the palace stimulated Yang Chen's memory. Since he couldn't move the idea of the secret plane for the time being, and he had to plan for a period of time, Yang Chen really might as well accept a few apprentices and train them well. It must be known that when he was on the Immortal Executioner platform, Yang Chen also promised many people that if he met a suitable disciple, he would inherit their unique skills. This was also some of the conditions that Yang Chen agreed to after receiving the information of those people. Since he already had the qualifications to accept apprentices, Yang Chen thought about it and decided to fulfill the conditions he had promised. However, Yang Chen did not accept anyone casually. He still had to consider it. For those with mediocre qualifications, as long as they were disciples of Chunyang Palace, as long as they were willing, Yang Chen could instruct them, and he would spare no effort to instruct them, but he would not accept them as apprentices. Since he had been reborn, how could Yang Chen let go of those talented little guys in his memory? Sure, Shanshan and Sun Qingxue couldn't be helped, but Yang Chen was still trying to establish an unbreakable relationship with them. As for those younger generations who were famous in the world, Yang Chen was naturally not polite and wanted to take them to his side first. Chen Mo, male, previous life overseas rogue cultivator, earth attribute. A soul-departing flute, a wandering immortal sword, no one dared to offend him in the immortal world. Yiyu, male, previous life Wuji Demon School's master's son, metal attribute. Limitless demon skill, almost arrogant in the demon world. Yu, female. Disciple of the Water Moon House in my previous life. Water element. Although she was a woman, no one in the demon realm dared to be disrespectful to her. She wore a starry sky magic treasure made up of all kinds of fine needles on her body, the Water Moon Mirror. Hana Mengyu. Female, disciple of the Green Jade Immortal Island in her previous life, would attribute. In terms of combat power, Hana Mengyu might not be the strongest, but she had the ability to accelerate the growth of plant. No matter how difficult it was to grow a plant, as long as it was in the hands of Hana Mengyu, it could be successfully grown. The method of planting the thunder pomegranate was all thanks to her. Just this ability alone was enough to make countless people scramble for it. Mu Bo, male. Disciple of the Taishanmen in his previous life. Sword cultivator. Wood element. He was originally a demon, a cypress tree that gained sentience. Later on, he became the hall master of the Hall of Eccentrics of the Taishanmen. He used his own tree core to forge the Netherworld Time sword and swept across the demon world. Although he was a disciple of the Taishanmen, he focused on cultivation and ignored external affairs. He had no contact with Yang Chen at all. Bing Kong, male. Disciple of the Cold Crystal Cave in his previous life. Mechanic, water element. The silver star formed by 6 ice crystal flying swords was unparalleled. He was also an outstanding mechanical engineer. The mechanical puppets that he created were simply treasures that all cultivators yearned for even in their dreams. Yu Fan, male. Rogue cultivator of the overseas in his previous life. Earth and metal dual attributes. He was best at 10,000 swords return to origin, which was similar to the 10,000 swords secret art that Yang Chen once used. He had a Cosmos Divine sword in his hand. Sa Nan, male. Disciple of the Divine Mystery sect in his previous life. Qilin bloodline. Qilin left arm, fire element. He was talented and unique. He had tempered his left arm into an indestructible Dharma treasure. After joining the Heavenly Court's army, although he was only a small heavenly soldier, even a commander like the mighty miracle god did not dare to slight him. Mo Chunmei, female. Disciple of the Blue Cloud sect in his previous life. Fire element. She was another outstanding disciple after Sun Qingxue for hundreds of years. From the mortal world to the heavenly court, the Blue Cloud sect was able to compete with the Taishanmen of the Mystic Heaven sect. That was because of the strength of Sun Qingxue and Mo Chunmei. Bei Fuyun, male. Rogue cultivator of the Kunlun sect in his previous life. Fire element. Crafting Grandmaster. In the immortal world, even Yang Chen's ability to control fire at his peak couldn't be compared to Bei Fuyun. Just this alone showed how strong Beifuyan was. As a crafting grandmaster, his magic weapons were unparalleled. He was known as the #1 crafting master after Taishang Laojun. So many talented little guys would appear one after another in the next 1,000 years. At this time, if Yang Chen did not seize the time to recruit them one by one, wouldn't it be a waste of the luck of his rebirth? Oh right, there was also Old Demon E. Although Old Demon E and Yang Chen died together in his previous life, that demonic art was the foundation of Yang Chen's power in this life. Speaking of it, it could be said that he had the grace of passing on his skills. In this life, since Yang Chen had already stood in this position, he would naturally not forget the grace of Old Demon E. The grace of passing on skills should be repaid with the grace of passing on skills. There was no better way to repay the kindness than to accept Old Demon E as a disciple and train him with all his strength, right? All these people, except for Old Demon E and Hannah Mengyu, almost all had some kind of innate or acquired spiritual root. Their cultivation qualifications were good, not worse than Shi Shanshan, Sun Qingxue, Gao Yu, and Gong Sunling. In Yang Chen's heart, he had already scheduled them as his own disciples. He believed that if he accepted these people as his disciples, it would be impossible for the Chunyang Palace to decline even if it wanted to, and he could actually become the master of these top-grade demons. How much he looked forward to it! In more than 300 years, Mu Bo would join the Taishanmen, and then slowly become the master of the Hall of Eccentrics of the Taishanmen. In his previous life, it was the Taishanmen who first made a Hall of Eccentrics, so all the sects had the rule of allowing demons to join. To join the Hall of Eccentrics, one needed at least the strength of the Yuanying realm. So at this time, Mu Bo should only be in the Jedan realm at most. It was necessary to accept this super evildoer as his subordinate in advance. He must not leave this genius to the Taishanmen. Accepting Mu Bo would not only enrich the strength of the Chunyang Palace, but also weaken the strength of the future Taishanmen. Where could he find such a good thing to kill two birds with one stone? What made Yang Chen a little speechless was that when this Mu Bo named himself, he was just as bad as Shi Kuei and Xiesha. It was clear that he reversed the name of his body, which was quite irresponsible. Fortunately, in his previous life, Mu Bo was strong enough and famous enough, so Yang Chen still remembered where his body was at that time. He had to take advantage of the present opportunity to accept this powerful guy as his disciple first. As for how to guide a demon cultivator, Yang Chen had many secret books of cultivation, and even the old tree demon had not yet received it from Yang Chen. For the time being, he needed to further see how reliable they were. At that time, Yang Chen could even give them pointers together. Chapter 570. After determining his target candidates, Yang Chen suddenly found that he needed to take these little monstrous geniuses one by one for a long time. These were the strong people who emerged before his ascension in his previous life. He did not know if he could find them all before his ascension in this life. However, even if he ascended, he must arrange for Chunyang Palace to take these people into his pocket. Mu Bo's body was in a wild land in the north, far from the central plains ruled by the orthodox Tao sects. The land there was barren, the climate was relatively dry and bitter. It was not suitable for plants to survive. However, Mu Bo's body grew up there. This difficult environment was also an important reason for Mu Bo's later dominance. The more difficult the environment, the more perseverance, and the more they could face all kinds of wind and rain. Just like Sun Qingxue in his previous life, she was excluded in the sect, destroyed her own cultivation base, started from scratch, and finally became a genius of a generation. This truth also applied to Mu Bo. On the way to find Mu Bo's body, Yang Chen could also complete one thing, that was to collect the first wood true essence. On the Immortal Executioner stage, an immortal who was beheaded said that there was a vein of first wood true essence in his immortal's cave in the lower realm. Yang Chen certainly would not waste it. Now Yang Chen was only a third fire and fourth fire dual attribute Jedon, and the other 8 spiritual powers were still at the peak of the foundation stage. According to Yang Chen's past cultivation experience, as long as he collected the first wood true essence and cultivated the first wood true secret art, he could at least ensure that the first wood spirit power could also be successfully condensed. He didn't know if the first wood spirit power condensing would trigger other attributes of spirit power to also condense, but at least it could make Yang Chen's Great Yin and Yang 5 Elements secret art more perfect. In the same way, it would definitely drive the process of other attributes of spirit power condensing. Just condensing, it would take at least 10 years to consolidate. At that time, Yang Chen's master, Gao Yu, was qualified to receive disciples after 10 years of condensing, and the first one was Yang Chen. Now, although Yang Chen said that the master of the palace had already recognized him as a disciple, Yang Chen also had to condense his own Yin and Yang 5 Elements secret art. That was the right path of cultivation. Just as the first wood flying sword embryo had been completed, he believed that with the first wood true essence quenching, the first wood flying sword in the great Yin and Yang 5 Elements flying sword would soon become another flying sword of Yang Chen. The ancestor Wang Yong was still in retreat, and his senior apprentice sister Gong Sunling was still following her master to study several sublevels of the Blue Vault Mountain Immortal's Cave. Over the years, some absolutely trusted disciples had been able to enter the Blue Vault Mountain Immortal's Cave to cultivate, and the effect was better than in the Chunyang Palace. Yang Chen just hurriedly greeted Gong Sunling, did not say much, and left the Chunyang Palace. Since the master of the palace saw Yang Chen casually take out the bodies of 15 big praying mantis and the Yuanying stage ancestor Wan Qian, he had never said anything about Yang Chen's safety. Even Luo Yuan couldn't do anything to Yang Chen. There were really few people in the world who could hurt Yang Chen. Perhaps except for those supermasters who really wanted to ascend, few people could threaten the safety of Yang Chen. However, since they were facing the ascension, how could they easily come out and embarrass a junior in the Jedon stage? No one knew what Yang Chen was going to do, and no one cared about what Yang Chen was going to do. What Yang Chen had done over the years had proved to the top management of Chunyang Palace that as long as Yang Chen was allowed to do it, they only needed to be responsible for solving some small troubles afterward. Yang Chen was definitely running for Chunyang Palace. Yang Chen still intended to endure for a few years about the secret plane. It was more important to seduce the little genius, strengthen himself, weaken the enemy, and improve his own cultivation on the way. Why not? The more troublesome thing was that the area where Mu Bo was located was in the territory of the monster race. It was still north of the plain of the monsters, on the snow-covered land all year round. If he wanted to pass, he must pass through the plain of the monsters and face countless powerful guys that may appear on the road. Yang Chen was a Dao sect disciple in the Jedon realm. If he entered the plain of the monsters, there would be a lot of trouble. In addition, the location of the first wood true essence was also in a secret place in the plain of the monsters. Yang Chen did not understand. How did the predecessor think of putting his own immortal's cave in the plain of the monsters? Was he originally from the monster race? This was very possible. There were many monster cultivators in the heavenly court. The one who was beheaded at that time was not famous. It was impossible for Yang Chen to have any contact with him. Moreover, with Yang Chen's cultivation at the time, it was very normal for him not to know the details of the other party. Although Yang Chen now had a physique that did not look like a normal human at first glance, coupled with the huge horns in his sea of consciousness, it was easy to be mistaken for a monster cultivator. However, this could not reduce the danger in the plain of the monsters, especially after crossing the plain of the monsters and entering the northern mountains. The area where the monster race lived was not a place where one could rely on reason to survive. The first determinant of survival there was strength. In many things, there was no right or wrong in the monster race, only the level of strength. Because your strength was low, it was a matter of course to be eaten by another powerful monster. No monster would come out to fight for you. As for the resource snatching and the spiritual vein snatching, it was even more common. Dao Ba, with the cultivation base of the late Yuanying stage, could barely mix here. The danger of the monster's plane could be seen. Before leaving, Yang Chen visited his friends again. In the past few decades, everyone had made progress. Du Qian even entered the Zhedan stage before Yang Chen, but this was also normal. When Yang Chen first entered the sect, Du Qian was already in the late foundation establishment stage. After a few decades, he entered the Zhedan stage, which was already considered slow. What surprised Yang Chen the most was Shanghai Feng, the steward of the Yixiu villa, who could not even achieve the foundation stage in the past, only entered the foundation stage a few years earlier than Yang Chen. Now he has reached the peak of the foundation stage, only one step away from the Zhedan stage. This could only explain one thing. Although the cultivation aptitude was important, the correct cultivation method could still change all this, and it was obvious that Shanghai Feng had found his own way of cultivation. The sect was thriving, his master had gotten rid of the original fate, his friends were also successful in their cultivation, but the enemy's sect was greatly damaged, and all of this was caused by Yang Chen. Was there anything that made Yang Chen happier than this? If he had to say something, then there was only one. After so many years, Xiao Tian finally completely digested the dragon qi that was swallowed in the treasure house last time. His whole body seemed to have grown a circle, and he was flying around happily in the medicine garden. Chapter 571. Now with the size of Xiao Tian, Yang Chen couldn't catch it with one hand. However, this did not prevent Yang Chen from using it when it was attached to a weapon. As long as Yang Chen used it, the hilt of the sword and the hilt of the incarnation of Xiao Tian would only be the most suitable size and shape for his hand. Gui Shanyu also found a lot of high-level magic weapon fragments from the portal of the Deshang realm. These fragments were Xiao Tian's favorite food at present. Every piece of broken skin could make it enjoy it for a long time. Looking at the lively appearance of Xiao Tian, Yang Chen's heart suddenly moved again. In the Dragon Palace treasure house, there were still a few things that could not be collected. Now that Yang Chen's cultivation base has also improved and Xiao Tian has completely absorbed the dragon qi, could it be considered to go to the Dragon Palace again to collect the remaining things? However, for the time being, Yang Chen still suppressed this idea. First, these things in his hands have not been completely collected by Yang Chen so far. Second, Yang Chen also knew in his heart that always letting Xiao Tian exceed its own limits to absorb the dragon qi was not so good for its growth. It always had to be enough. Even so, the growth of Xiao Tian still gave Yang Chen a small surprise. The reason why those magic weapon fragments were thrown away was that there was no value in recycling. Although the materials were still there, they had been mixed and sacrificially refined in various ways. It was difficult to reuse them. However, the strength of Xiao Tian really made Yang Chen a little stunned. After the magic weapon fragments were absorbed by Xiao Tian, they miraculously changed their appearance. The mixed materials were still mixed, but the traces of sacrificial refining were completely eliminated, as if they were swallowed by Xiao Tian. Without the traces of sacrificial refining, those materials could be refined and separated in many ways to become top-level materials that could be used again. It must be known that this part of the materials were basically produced in the Yuanying and Deshang realm portals, and the level itself was not low. Of course, Yang Chen did not intend to tell anyone about this benefit for the time being. Instead, he asked Shanghai Feng to pay attention to it and collect more magic weapon fragments of the Yuanying stage and Deshang stage. In the long history of cultivators, it was unknown how many of these things were piled up in various unknown places. As long as one had the heart, one could collect countless of them. To Yang Chen, these countless magic treasure fragments meant countless high-grade crafting materials. Yang Chen's great Yin-Yang 5 elements flying sword happened to be lacking all kinds of top-notch materials to refine. This was simply a cheap, raw material delivered to his doorstep. Speaking of which, this time Xiao Tian was also an upgrade. Yang Chen was happy and piled a large number of magic weapon fragments around Xiao Tian. Of course, the most important thing was the flying sword, the Blood Demon Vine flying sword, and the first wood sword embryo. Xiao Tian's body was coiled on the first wood sword embryo, and the Blood Demon Vine flying sword was in his mouth, playing with it. Yang Chen wanted to leave, but some people didn't want him to leave. Making up his mind to go to the monster race site, Yang Chen was about to report to the head of the palace and leave, but was told by the head of the palace that the island master of the Green Jade Immortal Island, Tantai Ro, came to visit Chunyang Palace and specifically pointed out that Yang Chen would accompany him. It was said that there was something to discuss. The island master of the Green Jade Immortal Island came to visit. This level of VIP was the first time that Chunyang Palace had received such a grand reception. Not to mention Chunyang Palace, even if it was the second-rate sect that was ranked in the top few, which sect had a history of VIP visits like the Lord of Tantai. However, what surprised Yang Chen even more was that the head of the palace actually told Yang Chen that this time the Lord of Tantai was a secret visit. He did not want to make a big fuss and asked Yang Chen not to leak it at will. However, what surprised Yang Chen was that with the Lord of Tantai, in addition to the two elders of the Green Jade Immortal Island, there was another person, which turned out to be Shanshan. However, what surprised Yang Chen was that with the Lord of Tantai, in addition to the two elders of the Green Jade Immortal Island, there was another person, which turned out to be Shanshan. Yang Chen also knew the two elders. One was Min Huafeng, a master of the Deshang stage, the leader of the great calamity of the demonic arts. The other was Guan Yueying, who chased Yang Chen in the vast sea for a month and later became a friend of the Yuanying stage ancestor. The appearance of the Lord of Tantai was like that of a person in his 30s. His face was full of smiles, and it looked very sunny. If they didn't know her identity, they would think that she was just a woman full of optimism about life. They would never think that she was one of the leaders of several major Dao sect, a powerful character who could decide the life and death of many people with a single thought. In addition to the Lord of Tantai, the people who came were all acquaintances, and they were all people who were inclined to Chunyang Palace. It was a bit strange that they came so secretly. However, since the other party had something to discuss, of course, it was normal to bring people who would not cause misunderstanding in Chunyang Palace. This old woman has something to discuss with the palace master. You young people, it is better to communicate more. Unexpectedly, after seeing Yang Chen, the Lord of Tantai just looked at Yang Chen up and down carefully, and then pushed Shanshan out, letting her get along with Yang Chen alone. It seemed that they were supporting Shanshan and Yang Chen with their own identity, but the whole secret action was strange, which made Yang Chen very confused. He didn't know what the idea of the people of the Green Jade Immortal Island was. Shanshan was cold in front of outsiders, but in front of several elders of the sect, she still had a respectful look. Listening to the funny words of the island master, there was a rare blush on her face. There was a touch of coquettish expression in the coldness. Almost in an instant, the Lord of Tantai, Elder Min and Elder Guan, who were also women, were outshone. Yang Chen, you take Fairy Sure to Meiqing Mountain, you have to entertain Fairy Sure. The master of the palace also commanded. The smile on his face could not be seen whether it was a performance in front of the Lord of Tantai, or if he was really optimistic about Yang Chen and Shanshan. What else could Yang Chen say? He could only salute and leave with Shanshan. Thinking about it, it was also funny. He and Shanshan were already people who were over 100 years old, but they were still said to be young people by the elders. Shanshan's face returned to that kind of frost. Because the master of the palace said to be secretive, and not to reveal the news of the arrival of the Lord of Tantai, Yang Chen directly put Shanshan into the shuttle, and soon flew to a high cliff and then came out. I haven't tasted the tea you made for a long time. It just so happens that the tea here is a lot better. Do you want to try it? Yang Chen looked at Shi Shanshan, who was standing on the cliff and looking at the scene of the mountains spreading under the cliff, smiled and asked, I got a good spirit spring. Chapter 572. From the Blue Cloud Sect Auction? Shi Shanshan turned her head and suddenly asked, Did you buy it with little Shui? Yang Chen didn't expect that Shi Shanshan knew so clearly about his own things in the Blue Cloud Sect, but he didn't feel surprised. He just nodded. I bought it under the guise of alchemy. However, I have tasted it myself. The most suitable thing is to make wine and tea. Seeing that Yang Chen didn't want to admit it, the frost on Shi Shanshan's face seemed to be a little less. Her hands shook, and a complete set of tea sets appeared in her hands. Yang Chen's movements were not slow. The profound spirit furnace quickly appeared in his hands. He used his spiritual power to urge the new buds of the old tea tree. After a while, he picked it up and began to fry it in the profound spirit furnace. If someone knew that Yang Chen actually used the profound spirit furnace with the yin-yang heaven burning fire just to fry tea, they would definitely scold Yang Chen for wasting natural resources. But Shi Shanshan did not blame him at all. Instead, she looked forward to it. She had no other hobbies, only delicious tea. It was rare that Yang Chen still had a common interest with her, and Yang Chen's tea frying technique was not ordinary, which made her look forward to the better tea that Yang Chen said. The effect of the yin-yang heaven burning fire was not generally good, and Yang Chen, in order to take care of Shi Shanshan's taste, even in the process of frying, slightly added some seventh metal spirit power in it. Presumably, with Shi Shanshan's metal attribute spirit root physique, after tasting it, she would feel more memorable. The water was, of course, the spirit spring water that Yang Chen bought from the Blue Cloud Sect auction house. As for the work of making tea, it was handed over to Shi Shanshan herself. Looking at a cold and incomparable beauty skillfully boiling tea, every move revealed a kind of fresh and refined beauty. It was really very eye-catching. The tea had not yet been drunk, and it seemed that he had already felt the delicious taste. Have a taste of my cooking. Although Shi Shanshan was cold and arrogant in front of Yang Chen, she didn't have any intimate expression on her face. Whether it was her actions or words, she seemed to be serving her husband. Even when she brought the teacup to Yang Chen, she held it with both hands. A mouthful of hot tea entered the stomach, and the whole person seemed to be warm, especially when it was mixed with the yin-yang heaven-burning fire and seventh metal spirit power. It was even more memorable. Even Yang Chen, the culprit, was enjoying it so much, so Shi Shanshan was even more intoxicated. This time, the stir-frying of the tea leaves clearly reflected Yang Chen's control after his cultivation had improved. The age was not bad, and the heat control was even more unbelievable. In particular, the hard feeling hidden in the tea was like metal, which made Shi Shanshan extremely infatuated. When the tea entered her mouth, even the spiritual power of the whole body was stirred up, as if it was attracted by that mouthful of tea. The enjoyment of a short moment was almost comparable to the effect of the usual circulation. Shi Shanshan's beautiful eyes suddenly widened. She didn't expect that Yang Chen's tea would be so different from before. No matter how delicious it was before, it was just a simple delicacy, but now it actually had an impact on her own cultivation, which was by no means described as delicious. Looking at Shi Shanshan's surprised eyes, Yang Chen couldn't help but laugh. The reason why he didn't say a word before was to create such an effect. Sure enough, the purpose of making Shi Shanshan surprised had been achieved, and Yang Chen was no longer tense and laughed out loud. How is it? My craftsmanship has also improved. Yang Chen had the intention to show off and asked with a smile. Looking at Yang Chen's proud face, Shi Shanshan just gave Yang Chen a slight smile as a reward, and then quickly returned to that frosty expression. If Yang Chen hadn't known from several contacts that Shi Shanshan did give him a high praise, he might have misunderstood that she was not satisfied. It just so happened that the sun was setting. Looking at the setting sun, neither of them had any interest in talking. They each held a jade cup and took small bites of the delicious food that no one else had tasted before. Even their moods seemed to have calmed down a lot. Keep these well. Drink more when you have time. What Yang Chun had just stir-fried was not just a drink, but a lot more. Yang Chun directly sealed it in a jade box, sealed it with a talisman, and handed it to Shi Shanshan. "Thank you." Shi Shanshan didn't stand on ceremony at all, and directly took it and put it away. "There's no need to say such words between you and me," Yang Chun said casually. But immediately he realized that he had said something wrong, and it was too late to take it back. "You're right. There's no need to thank me between you and me." Shi Shanshan took it seriously, and the corner of her mouth slightly curled up, which was a sign of happiness. Yang Chun couldn't help sighing again. How could he be so impatient when facing a beauty, and even say such words of misunderstanding? Could it be that he couldn't resist a beauty? Or was it because of Shi Shanshan's prestige in the future that she had to pay attention to him? It was hard to explain. But there was one thing that Yang Chun couldn't deny. He liked to sit somewhere casually with Shi Shanshan, and they didn't talk much, but just enjoyed the surrounding scenery and drank the delicious tea. He didn't know why, whether it was fighting or leisure. It seemed that Yang Chun and Shi Shanshan had a sense of silent tacit understanding. Shi Shanshan also enjoyed this atmosphere. She didn't speak for a long time. It wasn't until the night fell that she sighed and suddenly said, "Yang Chun, I told the island master about what happened last time." And Yang Chun grunted and didn't say much. Shi Shanshan was originally a person of the Green Jade, Immortal Island. If she told the island master about her own whereabouts, what was the fuss about? That batch of 10,000 years elixir, the island master also knows. Shi Shanshan said again. "And that's yours." Yang Chun had a sentence, but it was a little more, once again recognizing the ownership of Shi Shanshan. And this sentence made Shi Shanshan imagine a lot of things that she could no longer say. She thought that Yang Chun would be a little surprised or even uneasy, but she didn't expect Yang Chun to have no reaction at all. Shi Shanshan understood that Yang Chun really regarded those things as hers and never thought of occupying them. This feeling of being trusted seemed to be different from the sect. "This time, I want to ask you for one thing." Shi Shanshan bowed slightly and said in a low voice. "What is it?" Yang Chun still asked in a calm tone. "The raw materials of the questioning inner heart pill are those 10,000 years elixir." Shi Shanshan's eyes stared at the ground and did not look at Yang Chun. She asked carefully, "Can you help me and use my medicinal materials to help refine a batch of questioning inner heart pills?" Chapter 573. There were not many alchemy masters among the cultivators. It was not that everyone did not want to refine pills, but because of talent, perception, hobbies and so on, the number of alchemy masters was not very many. Therefore, it was commonplace to prepare their own medicinal materials and then ask an alchemy master to help them refine it. Yang Chun was invited by Elder Wu Xiong to participate in the process of refining the heaven-seizing pill. Not only him, Deng Ya, Zhu Peng, He Lianyun, even Fan Shan, who was not an alchemy master, had such an experience. It was not surprising that Shi Shanshan made this request to Yang Chun. However, because of the special nature of the questioning inner heart pill, it was now an exclusive resource of the Chunyang Palace. Shi Shanshan was not sure whether Yang Chun would agree to her request. Asking it out, her mood was also very perturbed. "Good," Yang Chun answered almost without thinking, so that Shi Shanshan, a person who was always cold, could not help but show a hint of surprise. "However, what are you going to give me as an alchemy master?" Yang Chun did not wait for Shi Shanshan to have any more reaction and immediately asked. It was also a very normal thing for an alchemy master to help others refine pills and receive remuneration. In fact, almost all the pill masters did the same without any exception. She did not expect Yang Chen to be so straightforward. Shi Shanshan was still in shock. When she heard Yang Chen's question, she immediately reacted and hurriedly said, "What conditions do you want?" "What do I want?" Yang Chen looked at Shi Shanshan with a smile and asked with a little bad intention. "As long as the Green Jade Immortal Island can come up with it." Shi Shanshan did not fall into Yang Chen's trap, but replied steadily. "Then there is no problem." Yang Chen smiled and said, "When the island master and the head of the palace discuss the results, I will think about what I want." This was very normal. After all, Yang Chen was still a person of Chunyang Palace. Such a big thing, of course, he had to communicate with the head of the palace. Shi Shanshan understood this. In fact, Yang Chen's actions were the same as what she had told the Lord of Tantai about what had happened. It was all because of their positions. In fact, Chunyang Palace auctioned the questioning inner heart pill a few years ago, and the sect bought one. Shi Shanshan suddenly spoke after sitting silently for a while, regardless of whether Yang Chen was listening or not. However, she knew that Yang Chen could definitely hear it. "You must have spent a lot of money, right?" Yang Chen didn't know how grand the auction was, nor did he know what the final price was, but he knew that it must have cost a lot. Together with the one above, the sect's best alchemist, Hall Master Duan, used a total of 3 for research, and each one was dismantled into powder. Shi Shanshan didn't know what kind of mentality she had. She always felt that she had to tell Yang Chen about this to feel better. She slowly said, "I already know what the medicinal materials you used are, but I have no clue about the refining technique you used." Sure enough, it was the style of a big sect. Knowing the preciousness of the questioning inner heart pill, knowing that a questioning inner heart pill could become a master of the Deshang stage, but they could still resolutely take out 3 questioning inner heart pills for research, in order to be able to refine the questioning inner heart pill. It was a big move, but unfortunately, they still underestimated the questioning inner heart pill. The reason why the questioning inner heart pill could have the effect of the questioning inner heart pill, the medicinal materials used only accounted for 30% of the credit. The remaining 70% was all because of the refining technique. Holding the questioning inner heart pill was like knowing the refining technique. Unless one had the level of a 7th grade alchemist master, it was simply impossible. A 7th grade alchemist master, even in the immortal world, was not so easy to find a master, not to mention in the mortal world. Even if all the alchemists in the mortal world were added up, it was impossible to understand the refining technique of the questioning inner heart pill. After spending a lot of money, they finally had to find Yang Chen again. Speaking of it, the Green Jade Immortal Island was also very helpless. However, the power of the questioning inner heart pill was obvious to all. The island master and the elders witnessed it with their own eyes. They had to promise greater benefits to the Chunyang Palace in exchange for a batch of questioning inner heart pills. Compared with resources, the most important thing in the sect was still people. As long as the masters of the Green Jade Immortal Island emerged endlessly, they could always prosper, and how many resources they wanted could be done. It just so happened that Shi Shanshan and Yang Chen had such a relationship. Of course, the sect had to make use of it. Shi Shanshan was also asked by the sect. After hesitating for a long time, she said that she had gone out with Yang Chen, and now there was a batch of elixirs in Yang Chen's place. Since there was this origin, then everything was easy to say. The Lord of Tantai let Shi Shanshan and Yang Chen go out alone. He also hoped that Shi Shanshan could persuade Yang Chen to take action. She and Elder Guan and Elder Min were to persuade the head of the palace. Shi Shanshan was very worried that Yang Chen would resist, so at the beginning she was careful not to mention this matter, but she did not expect that Yang Chen did not mean to make things difficult at all. He just asked for the reward normally. It was 100 times smoother than the imagination of the Lord of Tantai and Shi Shanshan. The more this was the case, the more sure Shanshan felt that there seemed to be a place in her heart that was slowly loosening and softening. She and Yang Chun were originally because of a misunderstanding. Of course, the initiator was herself. She didn't know what the elders of the sect were thinking, but they were vigorously matchmaking. However, after several contacts, Sure Shanshan became more and more familiar with Yang Chun, and she was also afraid of the silent tacit understanding between the two of them. Yang Chun never asked for any further contact, which was exactly what Sure Shanshan wanted. However, the feeling of more and more tacit understanding made Sure Shanshan afraid. She was afraid that one day she would not be able to put on that cold face in front of Yang Chun. If. Sure Shanshan hesitated for a long time, but still asked carefully, "If your head also agrees, what kind of reward do you want?" "Fire seed." Yang Chun almost did not hesitate to blurt out, "The third-grade fire seeds and the fourth-grade fire seeds other than the few fire seeds I specified." "How much?" Hearing that Yang Chun only wanted the fire seeds, Sure Shanshan's heart was even more relieved. For a big sect like the Green Jade Immortal Island, the third and fourth grade fire seeds were not so unimaginable, it was very common. "That depends on how many questioning inner heart pills you want." Yang Chun smiled and said very casually, "Your share is enough to make 2 furnaces of questioning inner heart pills. With my current ability, I can make at least 20. In exchange for a 5th-grade fire seed, plus 10 kinds of 4th-grade fire seeds, plus 40 kinds of 3rd-grade fire seeds, isn't that too much?" A questioning inner heart pill could help a master of the Deshang stage. To put it bluntly, if the Green Jade Immortal Island was willing, each one could upgrade a Yuanying stage master from the peak Yuanying stage to the Deshang stage. If there were really 20 masters of the Deshang stage, even if it was the Taishaman plus the 5 Elements sect, they would have to look at the face of the Green Jade Immortal Island. Chapter 574. With 20 Deshang stage masters in exchange for a 5th-grade fire seed plus 10 4th-grade fire seeds plus 40 3rd-grade fire seeds, the Green Jade Immortal Island was not suffering a loss, but it was a big bargain. Sure Shanshan once again fell into a sluggish state. She could not imagine that Yang Chun would refine the questioning inner heart pills for them at such a low price. If it was any alchemy master, it was estimated that they would take this opportunity to blackmail them, right? The only explanation was that it was because of herself. Sure Shanshan almost unceremoniously attributed the reason to herself. Of course, thinking like this, Sure Shanshan did not say a word. "Why is your body shape getting more and more outrageous?" After a long time, Sure Shanshan asked. However, looking at this posture, it seemed to be breaking the deadlock. Otherwise, with the change in Yang Chen's body shape, anyone could see it when they met. How could it be said at this time? "It's just a kind of body refining cultivation method." Yang Chen smiled and stood up. "It's not early, let's go back first. I guess the island master and the head of the sect have been waiting impatiently." This time, Sure Shanshan didn't say anything more. She got up and followed Yang Chen, and quickly returned to the Chunyang Palace Hall. As Yang Chen expected, the island master and the 2 elders had already arranged a residence under the secret and warm hospitality of the Chunyang Palace. Elder Gao Shuryan was still waiting here alone. Sure Shanshan was a guest. Elder Gao directly sent a Korjidan stage disciple to send Sure Shanshan to the large courtyard where the island master and the 2 elders lived. After settling everything, he returned to the hall with Yang Chen. After placing the restrictions, Elder Gao directly made a few secret techniques. The figure of Yang Chen and Elder Gao appeared in the passage of the Blue Vault Mountain Immortal's cave. Along the corridor into the hall, he saw the head of the palace and several other elders. "Yang Chen, Fairy Sure should have told you the purpose of the Lord Tantai's visit, right?" Palace Master Zhang Jiao did not say anything else to Yang Chen, and directly asked him to sit down. "Yes." Yang Chen nodded. "What do you mean?" asked the Palace Master. "I'll do as you say, Palace Master. If Palace Lord agrees, This disciple will concoct pills for them. If the palace master isn't willing, then forget it. Yang Chen had to agree with the sect on this matter. The attitude of Yang Chen, the head of the palace, and the elders certainly wanted to see it. Everyone listened to Yang Chen's words and silently nodded in approval. The meaning of the Lord Tantai is to give half of the income of the 100,000 Mountains Green Jade, Immortal Island, to the sect within 20 years. In the future, we will have more cooperation between the two sides. The head of the palace nodded and said, the sincerity of the Lord Tantai today, what do you think? This question was clearly to listen to Yang Chen's decision. The head of the palace spoke, but none of the elders behind him questioned it, indicating that everyone already had the same idea. Yang Chen had been regarded by everyone as an elder-level existence who could express opinions. This disciple is terrified. Yang Chen couldn't help but be moved. He was just a small Jiedan. In the Chunyang Palace, his cultivation base was not the top, but he got this kind of honor. Don't have any burden, you tell me your opinion. The head of the palace waved his hand and stopped Yang Chen's words. Your opinion is very important. When the palace master said this, Yang Chen couldn't help but be flattered. It seemed that as long as Yang Chen said he was not willing, the sect intended to push away this possible cooperation. Please forgive this disciple. Yang Chen knew that he couldn't not open his mouth. He could only apologize first, and then slowly said, since the Lord Tantai is sincere, this disciple thinks that he might as well cooperate. Anyway, this questioning inner heart pill, no matter when it is needed with this cooperation, maybe it can make the relationship between the two sides closer, and my sect can also take advantage of the opportunity to improve its strength. Well, if this is the case, then tomorrow I will reply to the Lord Tantai. The head of the palace smiled and said, we old guys also think that this is a good opportunity. However, cooperation is cooperation, your share can't be cheap to them. Just open your mouth, the Green Jade Immortal Island is rich and overbearing, it is not in line with their identity. This disciple also said to Fairy Sure that I want some fire seeds as a reward. Yang Chen did not conceal the elders, and directly said the reward and process he proposed at the time. Presumably, the Green Jade Immortal Island is a big family, they will not care about this little compensation, right? Hearing that Yang Chen had already thought of it in front of everyone, and even proposed his own personal reward, the head of the palace and several elders all laughed at the same time. Yang Chen even limited the number of refining, 20 pills in 2 furnaces. Others were not clear, but were they not clear? Yang Chen gave the sect 25 second-grade questioning inner heart pills in 1 furnace. After 2 furnaces, he gave the Green Jade Immortal Island 21st-grade questioning inner heart pills. The sect must at least get this number of second-grade questioning inner heart pills. This was still the most conservative estimate. With so many second-grade questioning inner heart pills, almost everyone present could guarantee that as long as they concentrated on cultivation, they would be able to enter the Deshang stage. If there were so many Deshang stage masters in the Chunyang Palace, wouldn't it be able to enter the ranks of the first-class sect? If these additional benefits were not counted, just half of the income of the 100,000 Mountains Green Jade, Immortal Island for 20 years was enough to match the accumulation of hundreds of years when Yang Chen first entered the Chunyang Palace 100 years ago. Chunyang Palace was indeed ushering in the best development opportunity in history. These were still physical benefits. The Green Jade Immortal Island owed the Chunyang Palace a favor because of this time. The favor of the Green Jade Immortal Island was enough to be worth the same amount of material goods. This time, the Chunyang Palace absolutely made a lot of money. Early the next morning, the master of the palace personally went to the guest house to visit the Lord of Tantai and explained the intention of cooperation. Yang Chen's own requirements, Shi Shanshan had already told the island master. Hearing that they could get at least 20 questioning inner heart pills, the Lord of Tantai and the 2 elders were overjoyed. As for the fire seeds Yang Chen asked for, It was really not a big deal for the Green Jade Immortal Island. Both sides achieved their own goals and everyone was happy. With these 20 questioning inner heart pills, the Green Jade Immortal Island's strength would definitely soar, and the Chunyang Palace would also enter the ranks of rapid development. The win-win situation made everyone smile. The success of the cooperation was inevitable to celebrate. Yang Chen's Jade Dragon wine naturally became a must-have wine. When the guests and hosts were happy, Su Qingxin of the Foreign Affairs Hall came to the side of the master of the palace with a strange look. "What's the matter?" Looking at Su Qingxin's strange face, the master of the palace asked, not avoiding the Lord of Tantai. "There are a few friends from Taishimen, saying that there are important things and they want to visit the palace master." Su Qingxin hurriedly replied loudly. Chapter 575. A few people from the Taishimen came. It should not be enough for the Foreign Affairs Hall master to behave like this, there must be other inside stories. Now that the Chunyang Palace had just reached an agreement with the Green Jade Immortal Island, some people from the Taishimen came to the door. Could it be that they noticed something? Is the palace master something that they can casually come and see? Elder Gao Shiyan, who was next to him, directly refuted Su Qingxin. "First send someone to receive them and ask what is the matter." "Palace master, they have 15 people." Su Qingxin gritted his teeth and could only tell the truth. Among them, there is also a Deshang stage elder who has not been involved in worldly affairs for a long time. The others are all Yuanying stage ancestors, and the leader is the Foreign Affairs Hall master of the Taishimen. A master of the Deshang stage, plus 14 Yuanying stage ancestors. This lineup was by no means a peaceful visit. Everyone's face suddenly changed. What did this mean? "I also ask the Lord of Tantai to forgive us, please sit down." The head of the palace got up directly and apologized to the Lord of Tantai and several distinguished guests of the Green Jade Immortal Island, then turned around and told Su Qingxin, "Serve the distinguished guests of the Green Jade Immortal Island, let's go ahead and see." Since the Taishimen dispatched a Deshang stage elder, who had not appeared for a long time, it was also appropriate for the head of the palace to come forward. The other side's lineup was so big, the head of the palace and Elder Jingfeng, Yang Chen were already mentally prepared. It was estimated that it was for that matter. Fortunately, Yang Chen and the palace master had the foresight to arrange everything properly. The people who came were of high status, and Su Qingxin directly arranged for them to be received in the main hall of the Chunyang Palace. When the head of the palace arrived, a group of 15 people from the Taishimen were sitting in the guest seats in the main hall of the Chunyang Palace. Although they were sitting, all 15 people had a frosty expression on their faces, and they did not hide their master's aura. In the entire hall, there was an unspeakable aura, and even the disciples of the pure Yang Palace, who were responsible for serving them, were trembling with fear. Everyone had a cup of tea by their side, but no one picked it up to take a sip. None of the 15 people said a word. It was as if they were demonstrating their strength. They just sat there and waited quietly. It turns out that Elder Ming and Hall Master Mao are here. "It's an honor to have you here in Chunyang Palace." Palace Master Zhang Jiao's face showed a warm smile. The person had not yet arrived, but his voice had already reached the hall. With Yang Chen's identity, there was no way to enter the main hall of Chunyang Palace to accompany him. Only a few elders followed him. However, this did not prevent Yang Chen from releasing a few traces of spiritual awareness to explore the movement in the main hall. Now everyone's conversation was heard by Yang Chen. Mao Qi was the head of the Foreign Affairs Hall of the Taishimen, and he was also the person who led the team this time. The full name of Elder Ming in the mouth of the head of the palace was Ming Guangru. He was the master of the Deshang stage who discovered the aura of Yang Chen's welcoming array. At the same time, he was also the master of the Taishimen's mountain gate all year round. In the name of guarding, he was actually guarding the welcoming array. Because Ming Guangrua had been sitting at the mountain gate, He had been in contact with the Taishaman's welcoming array for many years, so he was very familiar with the aura of the welcoming array. As soon as Yang Chen's array was launched, even if it was thousands of miles away, he could still perceive the spiritual power fluctuations over there. This time, I took the liberty to come here, and I ask Palace Master He to forgive me. Mao Qi was also the head of the Foreign Affairs Hall, and he was a slick character. However, he had been in Taishaman for a long time, and there was still a trace of domineering aura. His mouth was beautiful, and he asked the palace master to forgive him, but there was no apology on his face. The head of the palace had been in charge of the sect for many years, and this kind of scene was handled with ease. After the two sides flattered each other, the head of the palace sat down on the main seat, and asked, "Hall Master Mao and Elder Ming came here this time, what advice do you have?" "Palace Master He, this is a big matter, please forgive us for being presumptuous." Mao Qi's mouth was beautiful, but his actions were not embarrassing at all, and he said directly, "My sect was destroyed, and this hatred is absolutely irreconcilable. But the murderer is still at large, and the disciples of the sect have not caught the murderer for a day, and they dare not slack off." "That is natural." The head of the palace slammed the table, and immediately took over the conversation, and said passionately, "My Chunyang palace has also been destroyed, and like your sect it has been painful. To track down the murderer, Chunyang palace is naturally duty-bound. If there is anything I can help with, please let me know." These words were even more beautiful than Mao Qi's. Even if everyone present understood that this was just the polite words of the head of the palace, no one could expose it. After all, Chunyang Palace did suffer from the destruction of the mountain gate, and the initiator was the Taishanman. Mao Qi and Ming Guangrua were both people who knew the inside story. When they heard the words of the head of the palace, they even felt a little guilty. However, this time, the loss of the Taishanman was too great, and they had to suspect many people. Chunyang Palace was a very suspicious one. First, Chunyang Palace had been destroyed by Liang Xiaoming. Although it was not certain whether Chunyang Palace was aware of it, Chunyang Palace still had a potential motive. The other reason was due to the materials. The income of the 100,000 mountains made many people jealous. At the same time, some rare materials had fallen into the hands of Chunyang Palace. Chunyang Palace had the financial resources to arrange a welcoming array. Even if it was not done by Chunyang Palace, the materials of Chunyang Palace may have flowed outside. Perhaps this was a clue. Mao Qi came here this time to ask about the materials of the Pure Yang Palace. Where did they go? If that is the case, then I will take the liberty. Mao Qi was guilty, but he was not a simple person. He immediately climbed up, took out a piece of jade, and handed it to the head of the palace with both hands. He said with a smile, "I just want to know, does Chunyang Palace have this batch of materials?" "Materials?" The head of the palace pretended to take the list and scanned it, and then directly handed it to Elder Jingfeng. "Elder Jing, you are in charge of my sect's warehouse. See if there is any in the warehouse." After instructing Elder Jingfeng, the head of the palace turned back to face Mao Qi and Ming Guangrua. Ming Guangrua also seemed to know that he was not good at dealing with people. He did not speak, and everything was handed over to Mao Qi. However, the head of the palace had to show respect to him, so when he spoke, he also had to take care of Elder Ming. "Most of the materials, my sect should have them," the head of the palace admitted, "but this old man does not remember them all. I have to ask Elder Jing to confirm it." As soon as they heard the head of the palace say that most of the materials were there, the eyes of the Taishaman all lit up, and their eyes released an undisguised hostility. "Palace Master, these materials, the sect had them a few years ago." This scene, Jingfeng did not seem to notice. After reading it, he immediately replied. Chapter 576. All of them. When Mao Qi heard the words of Elder Jingfeng, he was 100 times more spirited. Even Elder Ming, who had been half closing his eyes, stared at the head of the palace and seemed to be waiting for the confirmation of the head of the palace. Elder Jing has been in charge of the warehouse of my sect for many years. Since Elder Jing said that there are all of them, then there are all of them. The head of the palace smiled slightly, ignoring the performance of the Taishaman people, and said with certainty, I also ask Elder Jing to work hard to move these materials out and let me check them. Since the head of the palace said that there were, Mao Qi was no longer polite and directly made a request. Take it out and check it? The elders of the Chunyang Palace, including the head of the palace, all had a stunned expression on their faces. The head of the palace could not hide the surprise on his face and asked aloud, Why is this? Let the palace master he know. In Mao Qi's eyes there was a hint of threat. My Taishaman sect was destroyed, and countless disciples were killed. It is entirely the power of a formation. The materials needed to arrange that kind of formation are among these materials. Anyone who has these materials is suspicious. There are materials that are suspicious? The head of the palace did not speak, but Elder Gao Shurian behind him had already said, This is too much, isn't it? The hatred of the destruction of the sect is absolutely irreconcilable. Mao Qi's face also changed into another kind of coldness. As long as the things of your Chunyang Palace are all there, then everything is fine. Otherwise, I ask the palace master he to personally go to Taishaman to explain to my sect master. As soon as this sentence was uttered, the faces of several people in the Chunyang Palace flashed with anger. Because of this reason, more than a dozen Yuanying stage ancestors came with a master of the Deshang stage, obviously with the idea of strong oppression. And there was also an implicit idea. Once they found something wrong, they would immediately start with the Chunyang Palace. If you take it out, what should you say? Elder Gao Shurian had replaced the head of the palace at this moment and asked directly. If the head of the palace opened his mouth, there would be no room for turning things around. Elder Gao would come forward, even if it was not appropriate. In the end, the head of the palace could still end it. The Taishaman also had the same idea. Mao Qi stepped forward, but Ming Guangruo remained silent at the back. If there was anything inappropriate, he, the great elder, would step in. Our sect roughly knows how many things Chunyang Palace has received in recent years. Mao Qi also knew that he could not force them too much at this time. After all, Chunyang Palace was not what it used to be. He said in a negotiating tone, As long as the number is about the same, there will be no problem. His words seemed to make some sense, but as long as one looked into it carefully, they would find a huge problem. The income of Chunyang Palace had only increased in recent decades. Sure enough, the other party had a rough idea. The problem hidden in this was simply shocking. What if my sect's warehouse doesn't allow you to see it? Elder Gao Shurian followed up with another question. All the sect, as long as there are these things, all of them are suspects, and all of them must be seen one by one. Mao Qi waved his hand and did not give Elder Gao any face. If you don't let me see it, I'm sorry, it is a guilty conscience. Palace Master, he has to go back to the sect with us. What a big tone. The people of Chunyang Palace had not yet answered, but someone had already answered. Do you want to go to our side to check it, and then take this old woman to your Taishaman? The voice belonged to a girl, and it was the Lord of Tantai from the Green Jade, Immortal Island, who came to discuss. Behind her were naturally the two elders of the Green Jade, Immortal Island, Elder Min and Elder Guan, and Shi Shanshan also followed. Bold? Mao Qi shouted and was about to explode. Suddenly, he saw the figure of the Lord of Tantai, and he was shocked. The arrogant expression disappeared without a trace, replaced by a panicked face. For the people of Chunyang Palace, the Taishaman still dared to be arrogant. After all, the strength of the two sides was too far apart, but in the face of the island master of the Green Jade, Immortal Island, not to mention Mao Qi, even if the sect master of the Taishaman came over, he must be polite and did not dare to neglect. Just now, Mao Qi dared to yell at the Lord of Tantai, which was already a great offense. Slap yourself. The Lord of Tantai's voice was not loud, but it was not polite. Slap yourself. Mao Qi, the Foreign Affairs Hall Master of the Taishanmen, even if Elder Ming of the Deshang stage was by the side, he did not even dare to argue. He directly stretched out his hand and slapped his face firmly, then bowed and said, "Island Master, are you satisfied with this? What? As long as there are these materials, it is the enemy who attacked your Taishanmen?" The reason why the Lord of Tantai appeared was because of the words of Mao Qi. The slap was because he dared to scold the Lord of Tantai in his face. Now it was the main topic. "I don't dare. It's just that my sect has suffered a great disaster, tens of thousands of disciples have died tragically, I have to find justice for them." As the master of the Foreign Affairs Hall, Mao Qi naturally had two skills in his mouth. Although he gave himself a slap in the face, he still had to make his own reasons clear. Of course, the Green Jade Immortal Island is not suspected, but the other sects, I have to visit one by one. Since the other party said that the Green Jade Immortal Island was not suspected, and he slapped himself in the face, he gave enough face to the Green Jade Immortal Island. It would be a little inappropriate to continue chasing after him. Since we want to get rid of the suspicion, I, the Chunyang Palace, do not do anything guilty, and I am not afraid of ghosts knocking on the door in the middle of the night. The head of the palace finally came out to smooth things over. Since the friends of the Taishanmen want to see it, then let's take a look. Although the words were pleasant to hear, the resentment in the tone could be heard by everyone. Of course, the Chunyang Palace did not have the confidence to challenge the Taishanmen. Naturally, they could not be like the Lord of Tantai, who dared to let the other party slap himself in the face. "Palace Master, he is magnanimous. We have offended you." When Mao Qi heard that the head of the palace finally let go, he naturally no longer closed his mouth, and immediately changed his tone. Then he looked at Elder Jingfeng, waiting for his arrangement. Elder Jingfeng frowned, and he looked like he wanted to say something but hesitated. In the eyes of the Taishanmen, they felt that there was something wrong with this. "What's wrong?" The head of the palace was stunned, and asked very strangely, "Why don't you get it?" "Palace Master, these materials." Elder Jingfeng looked at the palace master and looked at the people present. His face was embarrassed for a long time, and then he said, "These materials can't be taken out now." Brush, everyone's eyes were focused on Elder Zheng's body, and the Taishanmen people swept over with a look of seeing an enemy. Chapter 577. These materials were necessary for the welcoming array. With the intelligence of the Taishanmen, Chunyang Palace had enough materials to build a complete welcoming array. Now Elder Zheng actually said that these materials could not be taken out. Didn't it mean that Chunyang Palace was the biggest suspect? Originally, Chunyang Palace had a sect being destroyed once. The key to this, the high-level Taishanmen certainly knew. They were just not sure whether Chunyang Palace knew it or not. Now that Chunyang Palace was behaving like this, could it be that they were the culprit? Of course, their guess was right. Chunyang Palace did know all the secrets, and it was Yang Chen who detonated their mountain gate. However, who would admit it? "Why can't you take it out?" The palace master of Chunyang Palace had a look of anger on his face, as if he really didn't know. Reporting to the palace master, "These materials are good materials for refining flying sword." Zheng Feng hurriedly explained, "You forgot that 30 years ago, you ordered Gao Yu, a disciple of the sect, to refine a batch of good flying sword embryos for the sect to reward a group of outstanding disciples as a life source magic weapon. In the past 30 years, Gao Yu has continuously refined these materials into sword embryos, and most of them have been rewarded. How can you take it out?" Elder Zheng Feng's hint was exactly the countermeasures that Yang Chen and the palace master had discussed together. Yang Chen listened in the distance and laughed in his heart. This time, the Lord of Tantai came forward. How could these guys from Taishanmen not be able to bear the consequences? Listening to this, the head of the palace suddenly realized and patted his head. "I really forgot. After that, he turned to the Taishanmen and said apologetically, "I have let everyone see a joke. They have all been refined into sword embryos and sent out. I really can't take it out." The masters of the Taishanmen, headed by Elder Ming, were all livid and looked at the head of the palace without saying a word. Mao Qi stared at the people of Chunyang Palace with extreme suspicion. After a while, he said, "Since they have all been rewarded, they can't go far to refine their natal magic weapons. Why don't you call all these disciples out and let us see them?" "That's easy." Palace Master Zhang Jiao didn't say anything and waved his hand. "Call out all the disciples who have been rewarded. In addition, bring out the remaining sword embryos." This time, Elder Jingfeng did not say anything more. He turned around and left. After a while, he brought a large pile of at least a dozen flying sword embryos into the hall. "I've already ordered people to call those disciples. They'll be here soon." Elder Jingfeng was very straightforward this time. When he came back, he reported to the head of the palace, "These are the sword embryos that have not yet been rewarded." This scene made the people of the Green Jade Immortal Island and the Taishanmen a little puzzled. However, the Lord of Tantai was sitting on the fishing platform. He didn't say anything and just watched quietly. Mao Qi turned his head to two of the masters he brought and motioned them to come forward and take a look. The two Yuanying stage ancestors were also proficient in refining, and everyone present knew that. The two unceremoniously walked forward and picked up a row of sword embryos. One by one, they looked at it very carefully, as if they were afraid of missing something. After a while, the two took turns to look at all the sword embryos of more than a dozen flying sword embryos. Only then did they return to their original seat. One of the Yuanying stage ancestors smiled and said, "Sure enough, the master has a good disciple. Fairy Gao's refining technique is the essence of Elder Wang's refining. With her Jedon stage cultivation base, this is the best sword embryo that this old man has ever seen." When he opened his mouth, it was equivalent to admitting that these flying swords were indeed made with the materials in the list of materials, but it was not so obvious. Yang Chen found it funny when he heard it from a distance. These sword embryos were all refined by the Yuanying stage ancestors. Even if the level of refining was poor, it could not be made up for by the profound cultivation base. Moreover, Gao Yu finally processed it, without really using spiritual awareness. How could it be possible to detect the tricks in it? Although it was admitted that these sword embryos were made with those materials, and the materials were very sufficient, and the quality of the flying sword was good, but even if these materials were added up, it was only a small half of the number. There was still more than half of the number, which was also enough to arrange a welcoming formation. Reporting to the palace master, "Those disciples have been brought." Everyone waited in the main hall for a while, and less than half an hour later, someone came in to report to the head of the palace. "Let them all come in, the predecessors of the Taishanmen want to see them." The head of the palace directly ordered. Soon, a total of 17 disciples in the Jedon stage lined up and came in. There were men and women, standing in 2 rows in the open space in the middle of the crowd. They uniformly saluted the head of the palace and everyone. "Greetings to the palace master, greetings to the elders, greetings to the predecessors." Quenching the life source magic weapon was usually carried out after the Jedon stage. These disciples were young and full of potential disciples. It was clear that they were the backbone of the Chunyang Palace that was trying to cultivate, otherwise, they would not be allowed to quench their life source magic weapon at this time. 17 disciples, one of them has a magic weapon that is a golden seal, which consumes the most materials. Elder Jingfeng introduced, and even took out a list and handed it to Mao Qi. On the list, it was recorded what merits these disciples had, and when they received what flying sword embryos as rewards. It was clear and clear. What was the name of the rewarded sword embryos, what characteristics, how many materials were used, and the size, weight, and style were also clearly written. According to the records on the list, The materials that the Taishaman said were basically all in it, and the quantity was roughly the same as the number that the Taishaman had mastered. At most, there was a difference of about 10 pounds. 10 pounds of these materials. It was impossible to complete the arrangement of the welcoming array. Hall Master Mao, my Chunyang Palace is not afraid of the Taishaman, but I feel that the relationship between the two sides is not easy to establish, and it cannot be destroyed by despicable people. Elder Jingfeng had something in his hand, and naturally, he was not afraid to speak harshly. Now, what else does Hall Master Mao have to say? After Mao Qi read the list, he could not say anything more. He just gave the list to Elder Ming Guangrua, who did not say a word, and he did not pick up Elder Jingfeng's words. Elder Ming read the list one by one, but there was no expression on his face. Finally, he slowly said, "In the end, it is all recorded on paper. Whether these materials are used or not, it is better to see it with your own eyes." When these words came out, everyone's face suddenly changed. Chapter 578. Ming Guangrua had always been sitting in the seat of honor, but he had always been like a withered tree, converging his breath and not showing off. But this time, when he opened his mouth, everyone was surprised. Seeing is believing? What was seeing is believing? It was clear that these disciples had to take out the life source magic weapons that were being tempered and let them see. However, the reason why life source magic weapons were called life source magic weapons was that during the tempering, they had to use a special method to put the magic weapon into the sea of consciousness. It took at least a few decades of tempering, so that the magic weapon and the master's mind could be connected, and only then could the initial tempering of the life source magic weapon be completed. Just this initial tempering process could not be interrupted, so usually, people who were tempering their life source magic weapons would choose not to go out. The rogue cultivators were in retreat, and those who were in the sect stayed in the sect, seriously tempering, and did not dare to slack off. Even if they could not be interrupted, how could they take out the magic weapons to let others see? Once it was interrupted, not only would the life source magic weapon be damaged, but also decades of hard work would be wasted, and they would have to start again. Their own cultivation would be affected because of the damage to their soul. These dozen people, even Shi Shanshan could see that Chunyang Palace was preparing to vigorously cultivate the disciples, not to mention the others. In this way, Elder Ming clearly wanted to take the opportunity to destroy the follow-up backbone of Chunyang Palace. No! This time, several people spoke in unison, including the head of the palace, and several elders behind him. These disciples, at least one of them has been tempered for more than 5 years. Once it is taken out, all the previous efforts will be wasted, and they will be seriously injured and seriously ill. The palace master was really anxious. How can this be done? The disciples cultivated by their own sect would have to be abolished for decades. If it was the Taishaman, it was impossible to do such a big thing. No, no. The palace master shook his head again and very firmly said to Elder Ming, "I don't want to hide it from Elder Ming. These are the core disciples of Chunyang Palace, you must not do it. The hatred of our Taishaman for destroying our sect and the lives of tens of thousands of our disciples must be avenged." Elder Ming did not speak at first, but when he opened his mouth, his tone did not allow for refusal. "If I do not personally examine it, I will not be at ease. Senior, do you not trust the disciples of my sect? After all, the head of the palace was also the master of a sect. Some things could be tolerated, but some things were the bottom line and could not be crossed. Your Taishaman disciples are disciples, my Chunyang Palace disciples are not disciples? Do I have to let you do whatever you want to me? You can't say that." Ming Guanrua was a master of the Deshang stage. When he spoke, he naturally had the majesty of the Deshang stage. "I just want to confirm that Chunyang Palace is not the murderer who destroyed my sect. If this delays the cultivation of these disciples, this old man is willing to apologize afterwards. As a master of the Deshang stage, and also an elder of the Taishaman, Apologizing to several Jedon stage master disciples was indeed a big deal. If it was a small sect, under this kind of coercion, it could not be said that they could only obey. However, Chunyang Palace was not what it used to be, and there was also the Lord of Tantai by his side. He was asking for help from Yang Chun of Chunyang Palace. At this time, if the head of the palace did not know to borrow the tiger skin tree flag, then he would be a fool. Since it is just to confirm, the disciples of my sect will make a heart oath to ensure that those life source magic weapons are true. I think the senior should be satisfied, right? The head of the palace said, "There is the Lord of Tantai as a witness, okay?" If they made a heart oath, once the oath was violated, these disciples could only be trapped in the Jedon stage for the rest of their lives. These were the reserve core disciples of the Chunyang Palace. This method was indeed the safest way that the head of the palace could come up with without abolishing the cultivation of these disciples for decades. Everyone's eyes returned to Elder Ming, waiting for Elder Ming's decision. Mao Qi did not dare to make a decision, and honestly waited for the elder's instructions. "What you hear is false." Ming Guangrua thought for a moment, but still shook his head. Seeing is believing. If I don't see it with my own eyes, my tens of thousands of disciples of the sect will not die in peace. As I said, afterwards, this old man will personally apologize to them, but now this old man must take a look. The senior's apology is worth the 2,000 years of hard work of my sect's disciples? The head of the palace was furious. In the face of Elder Ming, who was at the Desheng stage, he did not flinch. Is it worth more than a dozen of my life source magic weapons? How difficult is this? As soon as the voice of the head of the palace fell, the voice of the Lord of Tantai next to him sounded. The Taishamen have a big business. Elder Ming has spirit pills to increase cultivation, and there are good magic weapons. If the disciples' cultivation is delayed, then use spirit pills to make up for it. If the life source magic weapon is destroyed, then use the life source magic weapon to compensate. This is fair, right? Lord of Tantai, what do you mean? Ming Guangrua heard the words of the Lord of Tantai and suddenly became angry. With his cultivation and identity, even the head of the Taishamen did not dare to speak to him in this tone. The Lord of Tantai's cultivation was only in the middle stage of the Yuanying stage. Unexpectedly, he used such a tone, which made Ming Guangrua's face ugly. "Why, Elder Ming, my island master can't even speak?" Ming Guangrua was a master of the Desheng stage, but Min Huafeng, who came with the Lord of Tantai, was not weak. She immediately stood up and looked at Ming Guangrua coldly, and her angry aura rushed towards Ming Guangrua. "Is the Lord of Tantai planning to stand up for this?" Ming Guangrua ignored the anger of Min Huafeng and stared at the Lord of Tantai and asked loudly, "I don't dare. I'm just afraid that one day Elder Ming will come to my Green Jade Immortal Island and use the same reason to abolish the cultivation of my sect's disciples. Your Taishamen may lose tens of thousands of people, but my Green Jade Immortal Island can't afford such a loss." The words of the Lord of Tantai were extremely cynical and sarcastic. An apology can smooth things over. What a master of the Desheng stage, what an elder of a famous sect. It really is a well-deserved reputation. What kind of person was the Lord of Tantai? He was the leader of the Green Jade Immortal Island. What kind of big scene had he not seen? Although his cultivation was insufficient, it was because managing the sect took a lot of effort, which led to the delay in his cultivation. But when it came to courage, there were not many people who could scare the Lord of Tantai. Don't look at Ming Guangrua as a master of the Desheng stage, there were also the famous Taishamen behind him. However, he dared to say such words to the Chunyang Palace. Even if he had 10 times the courage, he would not dare to do anything to the Lord of Tantai at this time, and he did not dare to provoke hatred between the two sides. If that's the case, then we will do as the island master says. Ming Guangrua stared at the Lord of Tantai, but he no longer opposed him and agreed. Chapter 579. The strength of the green jade Immortal Island was not worse than that of Taishanmen. Taishanmen had suffered a major disaster. Even if there was a hidden force to supplement them, they would not dare to say that they would win. Not to mention that the Green Jade Immortal Island and Blue Cloud sect were now a community of interest. Offending the Green Jade Immortal Island was equivalent to offending both the Green Jade Immortal Island and Blue Cloud sect at the same time. If Chunyang Palace and the Beast Taming sect were added, it would be even more troublesome. Although the strength of the two small sects was not very good, each sect had a master of the Deshang stage. The power of the joint forces was not a small matter. Ming Guangrua was arrogant, but he had to consider the consequences of falling out with the Lord of Tantai at this time. Although Mao Qi and the others were masters of the Yuanying stage, at this time, they were all staring at their elders nervously. Until Elder Ming said those words, they were relieved. This tone was really unbearable. It was obviously aimed at Chunyang Palace. They thought that this time, Elder Ming brought 14 Yuanying stage masters to Chunyang Palace. Who would have thought that the Lord of Tantai would actually appear in Chunyang Palace at this time, and even stood on the side of Chunyang Palace to speak for them? However, the masters of the Deshang stage, in front of the island master of the Green Jade Immortal Island, did not have any confidence to speak. This was the deterrent power of the Green Jade Immortal Island. Even the elders of Taishanmen had to consider it. What you hear is false, seeing is believing. The Lord of Tantai seemed to be trying to hit Ming Guangrua's face. He said without any trace of politeness, "This is what Elder Ming said just now. If you don't take out the things you want as compensation, why would Chunyang Palace believe that you will give compensation? Elder Ming is a master of the Deshang stage, you wouldn't do this, right?" If this was said by anyone in Chunyang Palace, Ming Guangrua could turn hostile. But now it was the mouth of the Lord of Tantai. Even if he was unhappy, he had to consider it. Can't take it out? Let's try something else. The Lord of Tantai didn't give Ming Guangrua any time to think and directly said, "Then how about everyone here make a heart demon oath?" The disciples of Chunyang Palace can make the great oath of the heart demon. I think the disciples of Taishanmen can also make the same oath, right? Since the Taishanmen were determined to destroy a group of reserve core disciples of the Chunyang Palace, then they must also be mentally prepared for a group of Yuanying ancestors to be destroyed. Who didn't know Ming Guangrua's plan? Who here wasn't a shrewd person? Who wouldn't be able to tell? Making Ming Guangrua swear was more difficult than making him directly compensate for the loss. The loss of a magic weapon was just a magic weapon. Let him make a heart oath and take the risk of not being able to improve his cultivation and not being able to ascend. He was a super master of the Deshang stage. How could he be willing to mix with these Jedan stage disciples of the Chunyang Palace? Moreover, the great oath of the heart demon was not something that could be casually made. Once the great oath of the heart demon was made, even if there was a little bit of a desire to violate the oath, it would be magnified countless times and become a heart demon. How could Ming Guangrua dare to say that he didn't have any thoughts of harming the Chunyang Palace? However, when they set off, they wanted to threaten and bribe the Chunyang Palace. Either they saw the materials and determined that Chunyang Palace was not the real culprit behind the scenes, or they took the opportunity to launch an attack and completely suppress the Chunyang Palace. Who would have thought that they would encounter such a thing? How was it possible for them to take out the medicinal pills and magic weapons for compensation on the spot? However, Ming Guangrua was Ming Guangrua. After so many years of being an elder of the Taishanmen, he immediately thought of a countermeasure. He opened his hand, and a brown, mud-like flying sword instantly appeared in his hand. This is this old man's life source flying sword. If their life source flying sword is destroyed, this old man will use his own life source flying sword to compensate. Is that enough? Ming Guangrua's eyes stared straight at the Lord of Tantai. His eyes seemed to be on fire. A master of the Deshang stage's life source flying sword was definitely more precious than these Jedan stage disciples combined. Ming Guangrua actually used his own life source flying sword. It could be seen that he was extremely angry. They have 17 life source magic weapons, and you only have one. Isn't that a bit bullying? The Lord of Tantai didn't care how much better Ming Guangrua's flying sword was compared to these Jedon stage disciples. He only talked about the quantity. You! Ming Guangrua was extremely angry, but he could only say the word. Mao Qi and the other more than a dozen Yuanying stage ancestors who followed him looked at each other. Everyone moved in unison and called out their own life source magic weapons. The 14 life source magic weapons of the 14 Yuanying stage ancestors were all placed in front of them. Elder Ming had taken out his own life source flying sword. Why didn't they hurry up and follow? This showed the difference between the Taishanmen and other sections. As long as they reached the Yuanying stage, the sect would choose the best flying sword at the beginning and let the promoted disciples temper their flying sword. Even if they didn't reach the Yuanying stage, as long as they had outstanding potential in the Jedon stage, they would deliberately cultivate them. The other sect wanted to have this kind of treatment, but they didn't have the wealth of the Taishanmen. There were 8 Yuanying stage masters in the Chunyang Palace before, but none of them had a life source flying sword. There were no suitable materials at all. Low-level materials were used to make a life source flying sword. Maybe it would be destroyed in a few moves, and the loss outweighed the gain. 15 life source magic weapons were placed in front of everyone. The people of the Taishanmen were all angry, but the target of their anger was not Chunyang Palace, but the Lord of Tantai. In this regard, the Lord of Tantai didn't care at all. The secret competition between the Taishanmen and the Green Jade Immortal Island was not a matter of a day or two. This kind of small scene, why would the few people of the Green Jade Immortal Island care? Everyone knew that it was impossible for the Chunyang Palace to obtain these guys' life source magic weapons. If it was so easy to get a cultivator's life source magic weapon, then it would be too easy. As long as they moved, these magic weapons could fly back to their side at any time. This point, the people of the Taishanmen were clear, the people of the Green Jade Immortal Island were clear, and the people of the Chunyang Palace were also very clear. For the Taishanmen to put on this posture, at most, it was a matter of face, and there would not be too much loss. However, to be able to do this, it had already made the people of the Chunyang Palace very satisfied. You only have 15, the other side has 17 people, you are missing 2. Of course, the Lord of Tantai couldn't let the Chunyang Palace not get any benefit. Since everyone was now in an alliance, he naturally had to consider these things. This time, even Ming Guangrua was generous. He did not hesitate to take out 2 magic weapons from his body and put them in front. Although these 2 magic weapons were not his life source magic weapons, they were not trivial. They were enough to be used as life source magic weapons. Is this enough? Ming Guangrua looked provocatively at the Lord of Tantai and asked angrily. This is a bit of sincerity. The Lord of Tantai didn't say much this time. He was satisfied and no longer spoke. Chapter 580. Palace Master He, my Taishanmen's compensation is also here. Palace Master He, do you want to express your sincerity? This time, Ming Guangrua finally turned his gaze to the Palace Master of Chunyang Palace. At this point, the Palace Master certainly could not have any hesitation. He directly commanded the 17 Jedon stage disciples to bring out the life source magic weapons that were being quenched. Although there was 1,000 reluctance on their faces, these disciples did not violate the instructions of the Palace Master. They quickly pulled out the magic weapons from their sea of consciousness. Taking out the life source magic weapons in the middle of quenching, the pain could be imagined. Even if they were in the Jedon stage, they could also be regarded as masters, but the faces of these disciples still showed a painful look. After a while, all the disciples were all sweating, and then some people began to take out their own life source magic weapons. The fastest was of course the disciple who had the shortest time to quench it. Basically, according to the length of the quenching time, the longest time was taken out last. After extracting the magic weapons, all the 17 disciples directly vomited blood, and their expressions were dispirited. The palace master immediately asked people to carry them down and carefully treat them. This scene made the people of Chunyang Palace glare at the Taishaman. However, the people of Taishaman did not care about these gazes, and just stared at the magic weapons. The 17 life source magic weapons that had been tempered for a short time were placed opposite the magic weapons of the Taishaman. Not a single one was missing. This time, Mao Qi did not wait for Elder Ming's instructions, and directly gestured for the 2 refining masters to come forward and inspect. The 2 masters, just like in the beginning, picked up one by one, penetrated their spiritual awareness, and began to inspect one by one. Because of the previous matter, the 2 checked more carefully. It took almost twice the time of the previous inspection before the 2 finished the inspection. After the inspection, no one said much, but looked at each other and nodded at the same time. This proved that the materials of these things were exactly the same as the list given by Chunyang Palace. That was to say, all the materials of Chunyang Palace were here. All the materials were here. Some of them were sword embryos that had yet to be released, and some of them were flying swords that had been tempered and were about to take shape. However, at this moment, these flying swords were useless. A magic treasure that was forcibly interrupted halfway through the tempering process no longer had any value. These materials were basically completely scrap. Elder Ming, Hall Master Mao, the materials mentioned by your sect are all here. What other advice do you have? The tone of the palace master was not polite and directly questioned. His question also carried a strong intent to chase the guest away. If you don't have any advice, then please leave. Ming Guangrua, of course, wouldn't say anything at this time. The facts had already proven that all the materials in Chunyang Palace were there, and it had nothing to do with the murderer. Of course, he wouldn't say anything. This time, we are really bothering Palace Master He. The one who spoke was the Foreign Affairs Hall Master of Taishaman, Mao Qi. This time, Mao Qi had a smile on his face. Palace Master He, rest assured. I will go back and report to the sect master. Chunyang Palace has nothing to do with this matter. Please forgive us for our previous presumptuous behavior. We will leave now. The group of people stood up and uniformly cupped their hands toward the people in Chunyang Palace. Then, they also cupped their hands toward the Lord of Tantai. Ming Guangrua seemed to have thought of something and asked curiously, I don't know why the Lord of Tantai personally came to Chunyang Palace. This old one came to discuss with Palace Master He about the marriage of my sect's disciple, Shi Shanshan, and Yang Chen. The Lord of Tantai said very casually, Why? Does Elder Ming mean that before this old one comes, I have to go to Taishaman to report? Coming to Chunyang Palace to discuss the questioning inner heart pill was confidential. Of course, the people in Taishaman couldn't know about it. The Lord of Tantai directly pulled out this high-sounding reason. It just so happened that Shi Shanshan was also there, and the matter with Yang Chen had long been a rumor. No matter who said it, they couldn't find any reason to not believe it. Shi Shanshan's cultivation genius was well known to everyone. The matter with Yang Chen was not a secret. It was very normal for the two to form a relationship. The key was that everyone understood what happened later. The Green Jade Immortal Island wanted to win over Yang Chen through Shi Shanshan. Since Yang Chen could refine the questioning inner heart pill, it seemed that it was no surprise that the island master of the Green Jade Immortal Island personally went there. With this explanation, it was a perfect cover for the reason why the Lord of Tantai personally visited. Ming Guangrua had nothing more to say. She just cupped her hands at the Lord of Tantai and the few people behind her. She quickly turned and left the main hall of Chunyang Palace. The head of the palace gave a wink. Su Qingxin, the head of the Foreign Affairs Hall, suddenly understood and chased after the people. No matter what, they had to do the things on the scene. The people in Taishaman simply left, and no one mentioned the magic weapons left behind. Everyone also knew that of the 17 magic weapons, only the last 2 that Ming Guangrua took out were considered as an apology to the Chunyang Palace. The other 15 were their life source magic weapons. It was just an appearance here, and it would not take long for them to be taken back. Thank you, Lord of Tantai, for your righteous words. The head of the palace did not go to the Taishanmen at all. Instead, he took the lead to salute the Lord of Tantai. Several other elders also saluted the people of the Green Jade, Immortal Island, and expressed their gratitude. This time, it was really thanks to the Lord of Tantai. Otherwise, the Chunyang Palace could only follow the previous secret discussion between the head of the palace, Elder Jingfeng, and Yang Chen, showing weakness to the enemy and letting the other party leave arrogantly. With the appearance of the Lord of Tantai, not only did they successfully overcome the crisis, but they also got 2 magic weapons, which could be regarded as a small compensation. It's just a small effort, no need to mention it. The Lord of Tantai smiled slightly and waved his hand. It's like this, but it's really necessary to arrange for Shan-Er and Yang Chen, so that the Taishanmen won't have any doubts. The head of the palace could only nod. The Lord of Tantai said that, on the one hand, it was indeed to solve the problem. On the other hand, it was to take the opportunity to finalize the matter between the two. The people of Taishanmen had inadvertently acted as a notary. Well, the head of the palace clenched his teeth. He would let Yang Chen hug on both sides and marry Sun Qingshu. His own sex Gong Sunling was no exception. When Yang Chen heard that everyone had left, he also came to the main hall. He retracted his spiritual awareness, but he did not hear the words of the Lord of Tantai before. When Yang Chen entered the door, he saw the 17 magic weapons left by the Taishanmen on the table, and his eyes lit up. Good stuff, let's see if these things can stay. Before everyone could react to what Yang Chen meant, Yang Chen had quickly put away the 17 magic weapons and threw them into the medicine garden. Xiao Tian had already received the order of Yang Chen. Things were thrown in, and as soon as these magic weapons moved, he would immediately swallow everything into his stomach. Chapter 581. Those are the life source magic weapons of the Taishanmen's masters. It's not so easy to keep them. Shi Shanshan followed behind the Lord of Tantai and saw the whole process. At this time, it was a bit inappropriate for the seniors to explain to Yang Chen, so Shi Shanshan reminded him. Isn't this the magic weapon left by the Taishanmen's masters as compensation? Yang Chen smiled and said, this matter can't be denied by the Taishanmen, so it's just a good time to publicize it. Why is this? Shi Shanshan didn't understand what Yang Chen meant by vigorously publicizing it, so she asked directly. Not only Shi Shanshan didn't understand, but several seniors of the Chunyang Palace and the Green Jade, Immortal Island, didn't understand Yang Chen's intentions. One day, when they find out that their life source magic weapons can't be taken back, they can't blame it on us. Yang Chen smiled again and suddenly said, everyone just saw that these magic weapons have flown away, right? Everyone was stunned. Flew away? It was obviously Yang Chen who put it away. How could it fly away? Guan Yuang's eyes lit up, and she suddenly asked, is it possible that Yang Chen, you have a way to destroy their life source magic weapons? I have to give it a try. Yang Chen did not give a positive answer, but he also expressed the intention to give it a try. This time, the Taishanmen were simply bullying them. Whether it was the people of Chunyang Palace or the Green Jade Immortal Island, their attitude towards the Taishanmen was very disgusted. Since Yang Chen might have a way to make the other party eat a silent loss, naturally they were very cooperative. In any case, even if they could make the other party disgusted, it was good. Of course, no one expected Yang Chen to succeed. They just felt that a big publicity could really make those guys disgusted, so they all nodded and agreed. Shi Shanshan had some different views in her heart. Yang Chen generally didn't talk easily. Since he said so, maybe it was really possible. Of course, she wouldn't say it out loud at this point. Now, in Sher Shanshan's heart, she was still a little shy about the island lord's words of marrying Yang Chen. Fortunately, Yang Chen wasn't there just now and didn't hear those words. Otherwise, Sher Shanshan didn't know how to face Yang Chen. The deal between the two sides had been reached, and now it was time to wrap things up. The island master of the Green Jade Immortal Island came forward to support Chunyang Palace, which also made the cooperation between the two sides more solid. The gratitude of Chunyang Palace would also allow the Green Jade Immortal Island to get more benefit. The Lord of Tantai did not dwell on the marriage between Sher Shanshan and Yang Chen. He soon took his leave. This excuse was perfect for both sides to discuss a few more times. This way, both sides would have an excuse to keep in touch with each other. Yang Chen began to pay attention to the flying sword in the medicine garden. Now he had changed his mind and planned to change his method to deal with those Taishanmen. If the flying sword was left in Chunyang Palace and was destroyed, it would inevitably make the Taishanmen hate Chunyang Palace even more. However, if something happened in their territory, it seemed that it had nothing to do with Chunyang Palace, and they couldn't put the blame on Chunyang Palace. Of course, these things had to be mentioned to the head of the palace. Once there was any abnormality, it would be easy to cover it up. This time, the sword embryos refined with those materials easily deceived the masters of Taishanmen. In fact, those Jedon stage disciples took those sword embryos into their sea of consciousness for tempering within a few days. However, after being carefully refined by the Yuanying stage master, it seemed that there was some foundation. All of the actions were real, including the removal of the life source magic weapon from the sea of consciousness, but there was a problem with the age. The 17 disciples, all of whom were core disciples who had passed the loyalty assessment, were now practicing in the Blue Vault Mountain Immortal's cave. Pulling out the life source magic weapon had little impact on them. It was just that the scene was a little uncomfortable and they could recover in a few days. The ability of Xiao Tian was far stronger than what Yang Chen had seen for the time being. It could devour those unconscious spirits in the magic weapon fragments, and in the face of these life source magic weapons, Xiao Tian had already drooled with greed. The complete life source magic weapon, which was connected with the spiritual awareness of the owner, was even more delicious than the broken spirit in the magic weapon fragments. If it weren't for Yang Chen's control now, Xiao Tian would have already rushed up and swallowed these magic weapons into his belly. The night soon came, and Chunyang Palace also fell into silence. In the silent night, suddenly there was a huge movement. More than a dozen magic weapons shining with various colors of light suddenly flew out of the main hall of Chunyang Palace and flew into the air, dragging a shining light, and collectively flew in a certain direction. The light flew very fast, and after a while, it flew out of the scope of Chunyang Palace. In less than an hour, it flew out of the scope of Meiqing Mountain. More than 2,000 miles away from Meiqing Mountain, Ming Guangrua and Mao Qi of Taishanmen were sitting quietly on a mountain top, waiting for the return of the life source magic weapon. The reason why the life source magic weapon was called the life source magic weapon was that this kind of magic weapon was connected with the owner's mind. Even if it was thousands of miles away, although the magic weapon could not be controlled to attack, it could also return the magic weapon to the owner. The magic weapon had already flown halfway, and they could perceive the distance between their own magic weapon and themselves. In another 2 hours, these magic treasures would be returned to their owners. This time, the people of Taishanmen went out in a big way. Although they lost 2 of the magic weapons of Elderming, it also proved that Chunyang Palace had nothing to do with the explosion of the Great Array. If it weren't for the sudden appearance of the Lord of Tantai of the Green Jade Immortal Island, maybe they didn't even have to lose these 2 magic weapons, and they could also suppress the Chunyang Palace, letting them know that even with the benefits of the 100,000 mountains, they were still a small sect that couldn't be put on the table. Unfortunately, it was all for naught. In any case, the main purpose had been achieved. The worry that Chunyang Palace had already known their secrets had vanished, so that it would not affect the arrangement of Taishanmen in other sects. Almost in the time it takes for a stick of incense to burn, suddenly, a Yuanying stage ancestor frowned, then directly jumped up and shouted, "My magic weapon, why can't I sense it?" With the first one, there was a second one. Almost as soon as the first Yuanying stage ancestor finished speaking, the second Yuanying stage master also jumped up, "Mine too." Then there was a series of panic. 14 Yuanying stage masters, without exception, when their magic weapons were about to reach their owners, they suddenly lost their sense, as if they suddenly disappeared without a trace. "Don't panic." Ming Guangra looked at this scene and shouted, "Wait a minute, wait for me to take back the flying sword, and then we will go together to see what happened." Just after he said this, Ming Guangra's body suddenly shook. His face showed an incredible look, and then he became furious. Who is so bold? Chapter 582. The 14 Yuanying stage masters, under the command of Elder Ming, quickly flew to the area where the flying sword had lost its sense. It didn't take them long. Especially Elder Ming, he was almost twice as fast as them, but when he arrived, he didn't find any clues. Originally, Elder Ming thought that there would be an unknown formation here, but it seemed that there was no trace of it. His spiritual awareness had already been released, and it directly covered a radius of hundreds of miles. In fact, when the flying sword entered this area, Elder Ming had already noticed the flight trajectory of more than a dozen magic weapons. However, at that time, Elder Ming did not always be vigilant. The life source magic weapon returned to the owner, even if there was another master of the Deshang stage who had the same cultivation base as Elder Ming. He could not stop it. But in such a short time, their 15 life source magic weapons suddenly seemed to disappear out of thin air, and they could no longer feel any aura. What was going on? Elder Ming, who didn't know how many years he had not sweated, at this moment, a few drops of sweat quietly appeared on his forehead. His own life source flying sword, it took hundreds of years to temper it, and then in the process of later cultivation, it took a full 1,000 years of sacrificial refining. It could almost be said that half of the Elder's cultivation base was on this powerful life source flying sword. Now the life source flying sword had disappeared silently, and he couldn't feel a little aura. This was simply equivalent to silently, Elder Ming's cultivation base was abolished by half. Elder Ming couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. The other 14 Yuanying stage grand ancestors, including Mao Qi, Hall Master Mao, were all equally frightened. What kind of power could collect their 15 life source magic weapons in a short period of time? Even when they noticed that something was wrong and wanted to control the life source magic weapon to attack, the life source magic weapon did not listen to their own command and disappeared immediately. Within hundreds of miles, except for the market in the northeast direction, there was no movement in other directions. Elder Ming and the rest could not understand no matter how hard they racked their brains. How could their own natal magic weapons suddenly disappear without a trace, without a sound, and without a trace? Anger, fear, all kinds of negative emotions appeared in turn. They couldn't figure out what was going on. Elder Ming and the 14 Yuanying stage ancestors only felt a burst of cold all over their bodies. Even the coldest winter did not make them feel like this. Did Chunyang Palace do something? Impossible. The life treasure was connected to the user's mind. Any action against the life treasure would be sensed by the owner. The people of Chunyang Palace didn't even touch it a few times. They just left it there. It seemed that it had nothing to do with Chunyang Palace. No one would know that when those magic weapons flew from the main hall of Chunyang Palace, they did not fly freely, but were bitten by Xiao Tian. Yang Chen drove the shuttle and flew with these flying swords at the speed he guessed. Xiao Tian's strength, except for Yang Chen, no one could realize it. The magic weapons were in other places, but once they entered the mouth of Xiao Tian, except for the owner, Yang Chen, it was absolutely an extravagant hope for others to control them. All the actions were replanned by Yang Chen, including letting everyone see more than a dozen rays of light flying up. Among them, there were people from Chunyang Palace, and naturally, there were also many rogue cultivators, and even people arranged by Taishaman. 15 life source magic weapons had already flown out of the scope of Meiqing Mountain. In fact, when Yang Chen made his move, it was already less than 300 miles away from Mingguangru. It was no longer the territory of Chunyang Palace. At this place, Yang Chen just controlled Xiao Tian to do one thing, which was to let Xiao Tian swallow those magic weapons one by one. The magic weapons that entered the abdomen of Xiao Tian completely lost their connection with the owner, and no one could sense their existence. During the flight, Yang Chen had been covering the sea jasper outside. After it was launched, no one's spiritual awareness could detect it. The magic weapons flew in the air, and the speed was not slow. Even if someone was curious, they couldn't keep up with Yang Chen's speed. Secondly, more than a dozen magic weapons took off. At first glance, they could see that it was so advanced, and no one dared to approach it easily, so as not to cause a misunderstanding. They couldn't even see the figure of Yang Chen driving the shuttle. Even Blue Shadow Luo Yuan's spiritual awareness couldn't detect Yang Chen under the cover of the sea jasper, so it was even more impossible for Ming Guangrua to find him. In everyone's perception, all the life source magic weapons suddenly disappeared when they were about to return to their owners, becoming a permanent mystery. Not to mention Ming Guangrua with Mao Qi and others, like headless flies, digging 3 feet into the ground in the surrounding hundreds of miles. Yang Chen had already controlled the shuttle to fly to Chunyang Palace. Before the sky was bright, he had already flown back to Chunyang Palace. Xiao Tian swallowing those magic weapons was the first step, and the next step was to erase the owner's will in those magic weapons. Obviously, this kind of complete and unformed spirit was exactly what Xiao Tian wanted now. What happened in Chunyang Palace yesterday began to spread after Elder Ming and others left on the first day. The next morning, it spread to all directions through various channels. At the same time, there was one more content in the spread of content, that was, countless people witnessed more than a dozen magic weapons flying into the air and flying in one direction. Everyone understood that it was the Taishamen who were retrieving their own life source magic weapons. Although everyone was somewhat contemptuous of this kind of behavior, the Chunyang Palace, as the victim, did not say much about it, and the others had nothing to say. Speaking of this matter, everyone said the same thing in unison. Chunyang Palace was inferior to others. Even with the support of the Green Jade Immortal Island's Island Master, they couldn't do anything to the Taishamen. So after receiving the 2 magic weapons, the matter was over. The Taishamen bullying others was not a day or two, and everyone understood it. This time, Chunyang Palace successfully created an image that could not compete with the Taishamen, and also completely removed Chunyang Palace from this matter. As for Elder Ming and others losing their life source magic weapons, few people knew about this at all, and naturally, no one would attribute it to Chunyang Palace. Chunyang Palace was quiet, but the Taishamen were like their ancestral graves being dug up. The matter of the sect being blown up was not over yet, and the disaster of losing 15 life source magic weapons was simply one disaster after another. The Taishamen had one more task to find suspects, that was, to secretly find out who could refine other people's life source magic weapons. Of course, the biggest suspect was the Green Jade Immortal Island. The events of that day happened in front of the Lord of Tantai and Elder Min Huafeng. However, suspicions were just suspicions. The Taishamen did not dare to directly bring people to the Chunyang Palace, and could only turn around to seek evidence. Chapter 583. Except for Yang Chen and the Taishamen, no one knew what had happened. However, Ming Guangrua and Mao Qi's group of 15 people were now living in extreme worry. The life source magic weapon had lost contact with its master, but for the time being, it seemed that it had not been refined. This could only mean one thing. Someone had used an unknown method to cut off the connection between the life source magic weapon and its master, but had not yet been able to refine it. If it was refined, then their performance would be the same as those who had lost their life source magic weapon, and their spiritual awareness would be severely damaged. That situation had not happened yet, which could only explain this point. In the midst of worry, there was a little hope. The other party could cut off the connection between the life source magic weapon, but could not refine it. This meant that they only relied on a strange magic weapon to do this, and their own cultivation base was not strong. If they could find it in time, then the loss of the Taishaman would not be too big. The situation of the others was the same. This could only mean that the other party could not even sacrifice and refine a Yuanying ancestor-level life source magic weapon, and his cultivation base was limited to the Yuanying level. Hope was in front of them, as long as they could find the other party. According to the situation that night, the other party was not far away, and the group of Taishaman had not relaxed their surveillance of that area. Unfortunately, even if they had dug 3 feet, they still could not find any clues over there. In any case, it was good to have hope. Just as the people of the Greatest Heaven sect concentrated in that area for almost a month, when everyone was about to lose patience, a sudden change occurred. Elder Ming Guangrua, who originally thought that the other party did not have the ability to refine the life source magic weapon, suddenly vomited blood, and his whole person instantly fainted. Everyone turned pale with fright and hurriedly protected Elder Ming. After a series of elixirs and miraculous medicines, Elder Ming slowly woke up. After waking up, the first thing he said was a sad cry, "My flying sword!" Those who knew the inside story immediately understood that Elder Ming's life source flying sword was refined by someone, and the spiritual awareness connection between him and the life source flying sword was abruptly stripped away. Under the serious injury of his spiritual awareness, the spiritual power in his body backfired, directly causing Elder Ming to vomit blood. However, this kind of injury was not enough to make Elder Ming faint directly. The most likely reason for fainting was because of heartache. The flying sword that he had refined for over 1,000 years had been snatched away by someone, causing his cultivation to suffer a great loss. It would be strange if he did not feel heartache. The others were even more shocked that Elder Ming was in trouble. It turned out that the other party was not incapable of refining their magic weapons, but concentrated on refining the magic weapons of the Deshang stage elders in the early stage. This also meant that the 14 natal magic treasures of Mao Qi and the others were similarly unable to escape the fate of being forcefully seized. The expressions of Mao Qi and the others changed drastically on the spot. Finally, he also felt the feeling of having his natal magic treasure forcibly stripped away. Although it wasn't their turn yet, that unspeakable fear struck their hearts. No one expected that karma would come so fast. They had just forced 17 younger disciples of Chunyang Palace to hand over their natal magic weapons by force and wasted decades of cultivation. In less than a month, they immediately tasted it, and the only master of the Deshang stage paid the price. Some people immediately began to suspect that Liang Xiaoming blew up the mountain gate of Chunyang Palace. After a few decades, the mountain gate of Taishaman was also blown up and tens of thousands of lives were lost. Ming Guangrua and others forced Chunyang Palace to abolish the magic weapons and cultivation of 17 reserve disciples. In the blink of an eye, they would suffer the same misfortune. Could it be that all of this was a conspiracy of Chunyang Palace? Although they were suspicious, no one really went to Chunyang Palace to ask for a clear answer. It was true that the strength of Chunyang Palace could not be compared with the Taishaman. Even if the island master of the Green Jade Immortal Island was present, they still endured the humiliation and let the disciples do as the Taishaman asked. If Chunyang Palace really had the strength to retaliate, how could they be so useless now? Cultivation was to cultivate a happy state of mind and a clear mind. This kind of vexation was not good for cultivation at all. Moreover, with that kind of ability, maybe they would have already killed them. To be able to collect the flying sword controlled by a master of the Deshang stage at any time, even in battle, they were already invincible. What else was there to say? The people of Taishaman were going crazy, but Yang Chen was admiring this flying sword of Ming Guangrao. Ming Guangrao was of the earth attribute, and this flying sword was also of the earth attribute, and it was of the fifth earth attribute. The material used turned out to be the spine of an extremely advanced earth dragon, which was mixed with a trace of living soil as a supplementary material, and then added countless rare materials to refine it. After Ming Guangrua's constant quenching for thousands of years, it was almost close to the perfect best quality flying sword. It was only because the greatest heaven sect was rich that they could find this breath soil. This legendary super magic weapon used to control floods, although it was only a trace, it made this flying sword never wear and tear. Even if it was slightly damaged, it would always slowly recover. The strength of its power was unparalleled. Such a good thing, Yang Chen directly accepted it with a smile. Among the great Yin and Yang 5 elements flying sword, the earth element flying sword had not yet been found. This flying sword was enough to be used as the earth element flying sword. Xiao Tian digested all the formed and unformed spirit in the flying sword, and even Ming Guangrua's spiritual awareness was digested cleanly. The ability to devour the spirit broke out with a frightening effect. If he wanted to use this earth element flying sword, Yang Chen certainly could not use his original appearance. However, changing his appearance was no longer a big problem for Yang Chen. Although the current yin-yang heaven burning fire was still very low level, there were several kinds of fifth-grade flames in the profound spirit furnace. After a few months, it quickly changed the appearance of the earth element flying sword. Even if it was placed in front of Ming Guangrao, without careful exploration with his spiritual awareness, he would not be able to recognize that this was his original life source flying sword. The earth element flying sword was already advanced enough. For the time being, Yang Chen did not have the ability to continue the sacrificial refining. Therefore, Yang Chen directly received the earth element flying sword into his sea of consciousness, buried it deep in the earth element layer, and tempered it as a life source flying sword. During the time when Yang Chen changed the head of the fifth earth flying sword, the 14 life source magic weapons left by Mao Qi and others were also digested by Xiao Tian. One by one, the tool spirit and spiritual awareness were digested by Xiao Tian. The 14 Yuanying stage masters of the Taishaman were almost lined up. Every 10 days, one would vomit blood and be seriously injured, and no one was an exception. Under this huge pressure, those at the back were almost desperate. They could only count the days, waiting for the day when they would bear the consequences. Chapter 584. Of course, Yang Chen would not know this. Even if he knew, he would not be soft-hearted. When those guys came to the Chunyang Palace and forced the Chunyang Palace to let those Jidan stage disciples take away their life source magic weapons, they did not think about being soft-hearted. This kind of taste, he had to let them taste it. With a trace of the earth element flying sword, Yang Chen's harvest was not bad. As for the remaining 14 life source magic weapons that had completely erased the master's will, Yang Chen did not look at them and directly sent them to the eyes of the palace master. Staring at this row of familiar magic weapons, the eyes of the palace master almost popped out. On that day, Yang Chen said something inexplicable and disappeared. He hid in his own small courtyard and did not know what he was busy with. He did not expect that after half a year, he would give him such a big surprise. Yes, surprise. He was surprised and happy. What surprised him was that Yang Chen did not even let go of the Deshang stage Ming Guangrao. This was a direct confrontation with the Taishaman. What surprised him was that those arrogant and despotic guys finally tasted the taste of their own life source magic weapons being taken away. After a change of appearance, it is still a good magic weapon. Yang Chen smiled at the palace master and said, "There have been people who have sacrificially refined it for us for many years. It is still the quenching method of life source magic weapons, so it can be used. If the palace master thinks that there is a disciple who has made a contribution, there is no harm in rewarding them. And the palace master's face also restored its calmness. He was surprised, but it would not last too long. Even the palace master had just learned about this matter. The news of the Taishaman had not come. Of course, he could not be too proud. This is your master's recent work, right? The palace master seriously commented. It seems that the level of refining has been greatly improved, but there is still one last step. The appearance repair has not been completed. Take it back to your master and carefully repair it. When it is completed, hand it over to Elder Zheng, and he will reward you according to your merit. Palace Master Zhang Jiao became serious. Yang Chen also held back his laughter and became serious. I will obey the palace master's decree. Putting away a pile of magic weapons, he went straight to his master's residence. The meaning of the palace master has been very clear. These things are the credit of Gao Yu. In any case, Yang Chen no longer needed the sect's contribution point. The sect's resources could be used at any time. On the other hand, Gao Yu still lacked some. Transferring it to Gao Yu was also a disguised reward for Yang Chen. Yang Chen soon arrived at Gao Yu's courtyard and met his master again. After greeting, he arranged a few restrictions. Yang Chen directly took out those magic weapons and placed them in front of Gao Yu. What is this? Gao Yu knew that a group of Jindan realm disciples in Chunyang Palace had their natal magic weapons taken away. She also knew that this was a cover for Yang Chen, but she did not know that the magic weapons of the Taishaman had been damaged. Yang Chen patiently explained the cause and effect, and Gao Yu's face suddenly changed. She thought that as long as she covered up those materials, there would be no problem, but she did not expect that Yang Chen was so bold that he directly took away the natal magic weapons of a Deshang stage master and 14 Yuanying stage masters. Picking up a piece, Gao Yu's spiritual awareness instantly explored the magic weapon. Soon Gao Yu discovered that the quality of this magic weapon was excellent, but there was no trace of spiritual awareness left by others. After inspecting it again, he heaved a sigh of relief. All the magic weapons were very clean, and there was no need to worry that someone would follow the source to the door. The final repair work, Gao Yu certainly knew what it meant. This was to finish up for Yang Chen. Gao Yu did not reject it at all, and there was a large amount of sex contribution points to get. Why not? How is your cultivation recently? What are your plans? Gao Yu accepted the task and put all the magic weapons into the Qiankuan bag, and then asked about Yang Chen's cultivation. This time, Yang Chen went out to set up a formation to harm people, but it did not delay his cultivation. During this time, Yang Chen had just been promoted to the Jedan stage, and it was the stage of consolidating his cultivation base. There were no bad fights, and it was just the right time to consolidate smoothly. Among these magic weapons, is there the natal flying sword that you promised me? Gao Yu was indeed surprised to see these magic weapons. Each of them was a very good magic weapon. They had been sacrificially refined for hundreds of years, and at most thousands of years. The quality was excellent, and she couldn't help but ask. Master is not in a hurry, wait until the water and fire dual spirit power is balanced, and then consider the matter of the natal flying sword. Yang Chen replied with a smile. Although the quality of these magic weapons was good, there was still a distance from the top magic weapons. Ming Guangrua's was barely good, but it was of the earth attribute. It was originally suitable for Gong Sunling, but Gong Sunling was an array cultivator and did not like the flying sword. Therefore, the things that Yang Chen promised had not been fulfilled yet. Are you going out again? Gao Yu listened to Yang Chen's words and seemed to have a premonition of something. She asked with some worry. Yang Chen did not hide it and nodded. Where are you going? Gao Yu asked again. Last time, Yang Chen was chased by Luo Yuan, and he fled all the way for 10 years, which made Gao Yu almost fall ill from worry. This time, Yang Chen was going to leave again, and Gao Yu must know where he was going. Monster Beast Plain. Yang Chen originally wanted to hide it, but after thinking about it, he said it directly. Seeing his master's face change when he heard the destination, Yang Chen hurriedly explained with a smile, "I'm going to get some things, and I'll be back soon. Master also knows that if I want to escape, no one can catch up with me." Yang Chen's shuttle, Gao Yu had experienced it, and she also knew that with the improvement of Yang Chen's cultivation base, the speed of the shuttle would only get faster and faster. Even Luo Yuan in the late Deshang stage couldn't catch up with Yang Chen in the foundation stage, so it was even more impossible for Yang Chen in the Jedan stage to catch up with him. Thinking of this, Gao Yu was a little relieved, but she still reminded him to be careful. Listening to his master's advice, Yang Chen just nodded all the way. This time, even if the Taishaman wanted to do the same thing again, it would be 100 years later. They could not inform the above now and change the date. Because the Taishaman came to the lower realm, it delayed Yang Chen's time for half a year. Although it did not seem to delay anything, Yang Chen was already a little impatient. Even if the Taishaman wanted to do the same thing again, it would be 100 years later. They could not inform the above now and change the date. His fire attribute spiritual power had been consolidated for almost 15 years, but his other spiritual power was still at the peak of the foundation establishment stage. If the yin and yang 5 elements secret art could not be completely condensed, it would obviously be affected. The first wood true essence could ensure that the first wood spirit power condensed, and it could also improve the yin and yang 5 elements secret art. Yang Chen must get it. After saying goodbye to his master, Yang Chen also said goodbye to the head of the palace and then set foot on the road to the monster plain. Chapter 585. According to the memory of the Immortal, the first wood true essence was in an Immortal's cave left by him, and the location of that Immortal's cave was in a huge 10,000 trees forest on the plain of the beasts. Along the way, with the shuttle and the sea pouring jasper cup, Yang Chen also walked carefully, trying to avoid trouble, and did not encounter any obstacles throughout the journey. It was rare to encounter a monster without eyes, and he could only look at the direction of the shuttle's disappearance and sigh. The 10,000 trees forest was also a lively area. Yang Chen was not sure now that the Immortal's cave that the predecessor said had not been discovered. It must be known that this was an area where monsters ran rampant, and a monster could have the cultivation base of the Jedan realm or even the Yuanying realm, at least for thousands of years or longer. In such a long time, it was not difficult to find a hidden Immortal's cave in the territory. In his previous life, although Yang Chen knew what was produced on the plain of the beasts, and he himself had come to the plain of the beasts, it was impossible for Yang Chen to travel all over the vast plain of the beast. On the side of the 10,000 trees forest, Yang Chen had never been here. A year later, when Yang Chen faced this huge 10,000 trees forest, even with the memory of his great principal golden immortal, he could not help but be shocked by this spectacular scene. The huge forest covered at least tens of thousands of miles, but this was not the most shocking place for Yang Chen. What surprised him most was that such a huge forest was actually all huge trees with dozens of feet high, with straight branches that went straight into the sky, completely subverting the concept of ordinary forests in Yang Chen's impression. Although there were shrubs and grass, almost all the trees were in that shape, which made Yang Chen very puzzled. Compared with ordinary forests, the trees in this 10,000 trees forest were several times larger. Seeing these huge trees, Yang Chen suddenly understood that the reason why there was the first wood true essence here was because of these huge trees. Trees originally belonged to the first wood, so many trees, more than hundreds of millions of trees. In addition to the 10,000 trees forest, in fact, there were far more than 10,000 kinds of first wood in the forest. So many first wood could condense a trace of first wood true essence. Of course, there must be a huge formation in the cave that the senior mentioned, similar to the one set up by the Taishaman in the barren sand valley. It could guide the wisps of first wood true essence into the Immortal's cave. But this spirit array was certainly under the 10,000 trees forest, and it was covered by so many big trees. Even if Yang Chen wanted to explore it, it would be impossible. Of course, how the first wood true essence was gathered, Yang Chen was not interested now. What he wanted to determine now was whether the Immortal's cave had been discovered or not. There were many places in his memory, but there were very specific locations. Yang Chen didn't need to spend a lot of time searching for them. There were only a few that were as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. The herb garden in Xiangyang Mountain was one of them, as Yang Chen had specially visited it in his previous life. The Dragon Palace's treasure vault was one of them. He just needed to find a few special reefs on the surface of the sea. The Blue Vault Mountain Immortal's cave was half of it, because the island was not very big. As for the others, whether it was the valley that the howling celestial dog said or the Immortal's cave at the moment, Yang Chen needed to carefully search within a large range. The Immortal's cave was in the 10,000 trees forest, probably in the south direction, but the specific location was not explained. It was just said that it was under a huge old banyan tree, and there were some techniques and incantations, nothing else. According to reason, banyan trees grew in hot areas. The monster beast plain was originally in the north, and the weather was cold, not suitable for banyan trees to grow. However, Yang Chen also knew that some abnormal formations were enough to change the local growth environment. It was not surprising that there were banyan trees growing here. In the big forest, if Yang Chen wanted to find the trees one by one, how long would it take? Yang Chen could only use the old method in the barren sand valley and find a few local aborigines to ask. Now that Yang Chen's cultivation base had been further improved, his spiritual awareness was already in the early Deshang stage. His spiritual awareness threads could be explored, covering hundreds of miles, and any powerful guy could be detected almost immediately. He didn't know if it was bad luck or Yang Chen's angle was wrong, but this area did not find a powerful monster. There were a few little guys who had just gained spiritual wisdom and were still in the chi refining stage, but this little guy's territory was limited. It was not known how long it would take for them to find it. It was easier to find a guy with a big territory. Looking for the monster, Yang Chen's speed slowed down and his figure was revealed. Putting away the shuttle, his body flew in the sky for dozens of feet. Yang Chen's spiritual awareness covered down and explored an area. The 10,000 trees forest was too big. Even if Yang Chen knew that it was in the south, he could only search slowly. After a full day and night, he did not find a few suitable guys. This situation was very strange. Such a large 10,000 trees forest, and this place was located in the Plain of Monsters, it was impossible to have no powerful monsters. But the fact was that Yang Chen had been searching for so long, almost thousands of miles, but he did not find a monster above the Jedon stage. The more abnormal it was, the more Yang Chen felt that there was a problem. Maybe it was related to the Immortal's cave. This also made Yang Chen more and more careful. Could it be that there was something he missed? Or was it that the guiding formation buried deep in the ground would interfere with the exploration of people's spiritual awareness? Yang Chen could not escape into the ground now to see if there was really a formation. There were strong roots of the forest, wood restrained earth. The 5 elements restrained each other. Yang Chen's earth escape encountered such a huge forest root, it was simply a natural nemesis. And Yang Chen could not determine what kind of formation it was. Would it be interfered with because of his own exploration? Relatively speaking, it was more appropriate to find some monsters to ask for directions. Suddenly, Yang Chen seemed to find that he was being stared at by someone. This feeling was like being stared at by a beast, giving people a cold feeling on the back of their neck. As soon as he realized this, Yang Chen almost immediately probed with his spiritual awareness, trying to find out what he was being stared at. He was not afraid of the appearance of a powerful monster now. What he was afraid of was that there was no one. This guy who was staring at himself, could actually avoid the exploration of his own spiritual awareness, it was obviously a great guy. Between the monsters, because of the battle for territory, sometimes when they met they would fight to the death. Yang Chen was not afraid of hostility, as long as the other party was not a master of the Deshang stage. Yang Chen had the confidence to communicate with the other party on an equal footing. Soon, Yang Chen found the source of hostility. To Yang Chen's surprise, this hostility turned out to come from above. Chapter 586. Searching for the monsters in the 10,000 trees forest, Yang Chen directly covered the ground, but missed the top. Now he remembered that there were some powerful guys who could fly in the air. The spiritual awareness threads suddenly popped up, and Yang Chen determined the position of the other party almost instantly. The reason why he did not release all of his spiritual awareness was that Yang Chen was also afraid that his Deshang stage spiritual awareness would cause the other party to be afraid and leave. It was a huge golden eagle. It was flying so high that its huge body looked very small. However, the golden eagle was very fast, it was high in the sky, flying in circles, and its eyes have been staring at Yang Chen. Along with the spiritual awareness threads, there was also a thought sent by Yang Chen's beast controlling secret art. As soon as it touched the other party's body, this thought was immediately passed. Fellow Taoist, I want to ask for directions, there will be a reward. This was the content expressed by Yang Chen's thought. The other party didn't seem to expect that Yang Chen could pass his thoughts to himself at such a distance. The flying figure in the air stopped, and then began to slowly descend. The golden eagle did not have such a strong spiritual awareness as Yang Chen. After descending to a certain distance, Yang Chen felt the problem passed by the golden eagle. Where to? What is the reward? This was a golden eagle at the peak Jedon stage, with a body size of 100 feet. It's just that in the eyes of Yang Chen, this guy was weak and pitiful. Even if Yang Chen did not use a magic weapon, it was estimated that his strong physical body could be evenly matched with the other party. I'm looking for a huge old banyan tree, the one in the south of the 10,000 trees forest. Yang Chen finally found a guy who could communicate with him, and the golden eagle was just right for his requirements. As for the reward, what does the fellow Taoist want? Although the cultivation base was not very strong, the golden eagle flew in the air, and the territory was more extensive than the monsters on the ground. Moreover, the golden eagle's good power could also see very far, from top to bottom. Few things could hide from his eyes. Old banyan tree? The golden hawk flew closer and seemed to be stunned after sensing Yang Chen's question. Are you from outside? That's right. Yang Chen didn't understand what the golden eagle meant, but it didn't matter much to admit that he was from the outside, so he generously gave an affirmative answer. No wonder. The golden eagle flapped its wings condescendingly and hovered 1,000 feet away from Yang Chen. It transmitted a thought to him. Little calf, why are you looking for the old banyan tree? This question was really strange. Yang Chen couldn't figure it out for a while. After being stunned for a while, he said, We have to go under the tree. You know that place? The thought of the golden eagle came through again, abruptly interrupting Yang Chen's hesitation, followed by another question. How do you know that place? That place? Yang Chen was really stunned this time. Before he came, he thought that maybe the Immortal's cave would be discovered by some monsters. Now it seemed that his worries had come true. The golden eagle actually knew the Immortal's cave, and asked Yang Chen how he knew it. It seemed that it was not only the golden eagle who knew. It seemed that there were more monsters who knew the Immortal's cave, and it seemed that these guys did not want outsiders to know the location of the Immortal's cave. It was a senior who told me. Yang Chen still did not lie, he just said the senior. What he said was indeed true, whether according to age or according to seniority, the Immortal who was killed by himself was enough to be called a senior. Is it the old man Xian He? I told him not to tell outsiders casually. In the mind of the golden eagle there was a complaint. As for who the Xian He was in the mouth of the golden eagle, Yang Chen didn't know at all. Since someone told you, then you come with me. The golden eagle didn't say anything more this time and flew directly in a certain direction. At the same time, he also left a sentence for Yang Chen. I will take you there. For the sake of acquaintances, I will only charge you 50 jin of low-grade spirit stones. If you don't agree, then forget it. How could 50 jin of low-grade spirit stones enter the eyes of Yang Chen? He directly threw a jin of middle-grade spirit stones to the golden eagle, which was twice the price of his asking price. This golden eagle seemed to be a money-loving creature. Seeing that Yang Chen was so generous, it even flew down and said, You come to my back, I will take you there. Yang Chen was overjoyed. He didn't expect that his generosity would have such benefit. He directly jumped on the broad back of the golden eagle and sat down. He only felt the wind around him whistling, and in a moment, he flew 100 miles away. Whether it was flying on a sword or driving a shuttle, it would make the monsters aware of his identity as a Tao sect disciple. This golden eagle didn't know if he had seen the scene of him driving the shuttle. Anyway, now he had regarded Yang Chen as a calf, thinking that he was a fellow monster race cultivator, flying with him, but without any tricks. Fellow Taoist, why do you need spirit stones? Sitting on the back of the golden eagle, Yang Chen also curiously transmitted a thought and asked. This was a question he always couldn't understand. When did the monsters start to use spirit stones? Why don't I need spirit stones? The Immortal's cave is full of spiritual power. If you want to go in and cultivate, you have to hand in the spirit stones on time. The golden eagle quickly replied. Your gene of middle-grade spirit stones is enough for me to cultivate in it for a month. Listening to the answer of the golden eagle, Yang Chen was shocked again. Why, is there someone in charge of this Immortal's cave? If someone was in charge, wouldn't Yang Chen want to collect the first wood true essence? The big Immortal's cave naturally needs someone to take care of it. Otherwise, if anyone can go in, wouldn't it waste the Immortal's cave's spiritual power? The golden eagle was very surprised how Yang Chen would ask such a question, but immediately realized it and gave an explanation. The place where Taoist friend cultivates, it must be everyone who fights for it, who grabs it. What kind of realm can a rogue cultivator cultivate to? Looking at the Taoist friend's body, it must be a body refining technique, but there is no advanced secret art? I also asked Taoist friend to dispel my doubts. A few words had already made Yang Chen completely shocked. In this Immortal's cave, there was actually a cultivation secret art? Yes, if the predecessor was from the monster race before ascending, he might have left something. The Immortal's cave is now under the management of the two Dashang realm seniors. As long as it is a fellow monster race cultivator, if there is an acquaintance, you can cultivate in the Immortal's cave. The golden eagle quickly explained. As long as you have enough spirit stones, you can stay in it for as long as you want. You can even buy advanced secret arts, various materials and medicinal pills. Most of the fellow Taoists in the 10,000 Trees Forest are cultivating in the Immortal's cave. This explanation finally made Yang Chen understand that because of the existence of the Immortal's cave, the monster race in this area was completely different from other places. No wonder Yang Chen had not found a monster cultivator. It turned out that they were all concentrated in the Immortal's cave.